Like, this is a super week that's coming up this week, but there really isn't any interesting games. FlyQuest has already beaten all of the good teams, and they're literally their schedule is Immortals, TSM, CLG. Not to say they won't get upset, because that's just what happens in super weeks, but you know, the level of hype is pretty low.
We need new terminology. That shouldn't be allowed to be called a super week. That should have to be called a Clark week, because that's Clark Kent. He hasn't even got into the telephone booth. He hasn't transformed into Superman. There's no good games there. This is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight, the flagship show of Last Free Nation, which is obviously the channel that you're on. So if you're on the Twitch, chuck over the fucking primes or whatever that is. Also, if you're the editor, edit out me saying the F word there for the first 30 seconds of the video. It's covering all bases here, boys. If you're watching the VOD, like, put a comment, sub, or don't do any of that stuff, and then we'll just go bankrupt and just everything will end, and it'll just be Ori Riot and Euphoria, which they stole the name from Veteran, and I don't know, the Dive, which and the joke is like that just becomes more and more appropriate a name as time goes on. You know, not least because eventually they have just started recruiting people to work on the LCS who could be found in an LA dive bar. So it's obviously entirely on brand at this point in time, isn't it?
You know what's funny is they don't even film it in a dive bar
at all. That's one of the things I'll never get, by the way. Like, it doesn't really fit, to me, those shows, which, look, if that was like you're trying to be Joe Rogan, it looks great in that studio. It looks super high production, but like, how does that fit gaming, though? You know what I mean? Like, I would have like a cool set or something. Like, put it this way, one thing I always thought was quite cool, even though, to be fair, you could also pin it that he was a bit of a fraud, was, you know, when Day 9 first got huge, he just made like a studio that looked exactly like his bedroom when he did the Day 9 dailies, even though it was a studio. And if you saw it the other angle, you're like, what the hell? But like, it just kept that like vibe, didn't it? I would go for something cool like that. I'd have some like old, like I'd have like an old CRT monitor and stuff. I'd have like the old vibes if I was doing that type of show.
Well, there you go. That we can look forward to that with the Last Free Nation studio eventually.
Yeah,
although a bunch of CRT monitors with the LFN logo would look pretty cool. It would look pretty cool.
There you go. Not least because, by the way, if on the pirate theme, when was piracy ever at more its heyday in the gaming space than the 2000s, the CRT era, of course. The old LAN parties where you just connect up, start looking through everyone's folders. Oh, maybe they shouldn't have left that folder shared. Might just download a little bit of that. Educational and curiosity defining.
The Zoomers are going to have no idea what you're talking about.
They're not even going to know. I know.
All the boomers know exactly what was going on at DreamHack.
I purposely sort of kept that one really subtle for the old heads to understand. Right. Obviously, if people know the style we're doing, we had Papa Smithy on the last episode, so watch the VOD on the channel. He gives loads of great insights into like how you build a team, what he thinks of building different squads. Even I thought we had a very interesting meta discussion about how you coach teams and how we could bring like sports elements into esports. It wasn't just like that week of the LCS, but usually we are going to do this as a two-man show. And as we've pointed out, if you're not a fan of old school Summoning Insight, it's way more like that. Like, it's not just we do the drama, we have the guests, we talk about their region, their thing, and then questions. Now what we're doing is every week we watch all the big games. Monty obviously does his bangers only stream where you'll actually find the best VODs. And also you'll have seen before, if you watch the Twitch VOD, we have like the top 5 players each week, which he does do. This is my idea. This is his part, obviously. He does self-indulgently dress up in fancy dress and create like, you know, when he was doing that whole thing where he kept streaming as a cowboy, he's doing that again. So this one, he was like sort of like a gnarly bike rider, like some sort of like Harley Davidson enthusiast.
He's up to his shenanigans again.
He's on some Sons of Anarchy shit, basically. Yeah, he's doing one of those ones. So it's all good. It's all good. So there'll be more of that. And so, yeah, the point now is we're covering all the big regions.
Look, I figured it would be more interesting and grab people's attention more than me just doing it straight, right?
Yeah, true.
You know, you got it. We make sacrifices. May not be everybody's cup of tea. May not even be my cup of tea, frankly. But you know, I know what moves the viewers. I know it moves the viewers. And honestly, people seem to really like it. So it's even better this week. We're getting it down. People have now demanded more characters, but we'll see about that one. We can go down the rabbit hole of the Monteverse. We definitely can. We could do a lot of weird shit, but it just depends on how much of a burden that is on our editor, changing the entire theme of the top 5 every week. Anyway, the top 5s are fun. We're also going to have global power rankings out in the next day or two. I need to finish recording those today, so you guys can look forward to that as well. So now you get all the content that normal sports have, but we don't have because nobody watches all the regions, which was the problem. Nobody watches all the good game.
crucially, like, no one watches all the regions. Like, it's only people who work in the industry who do. Like, stop lying if you're fans. Just stop lying. Like, I have some of the most hardcore league fans in the world on my Discord, and there's probably, like, no joke, like a handful who watch more than 2 regions. Like, it's just obvious at this point in time. So anyway, the point I was going to say is this, is when we actually do set up all these different regions and all the rest of that jazz, one of the cool things now is we don't have to talk just about the LCS. So spoiler, this episode probably won't talk about LCS. We'll do the big Asian regions, talk about LEC, which I'd obviously already, by the way. Should we do LEC first? Should we knock that one out?
I do. I want to do the quick recap of LCS this last week, just for it, because we're not doing LCS on, well, we did a little bit, I guess, on Power Spike, but here it goes, guys. Here it goes. It was boring.
Yeah.
Nothing happened. FlyQuest undefeated. They rolled 100 Thieves. They're clearly a tier above everybody else. Dignitas still sucks. Team Liquid is horrible. Go watch Power Spike if you want to hear about the frauds in NA. That's it. You know, I didn't invent the format and the bad teams that made it boring, okay?
So I'll tell you right now, Monty, that's what's killing the region now. The joke is this. You know how they always used Europe as the test region to decide if they want to do something or not, even though I will say they eventually did it the other way around by doing double elim and stuff in NA. So they had times when they went in both. The thing that is making LCS so bad isn't even just the teams. Like, you know that, like, FlyQuest is an interesting team to watch, and the Thieves aren't bad. There's a couple of good teams. What kills them is we've already passed that phase in LEC. We did the round robin already. And so because that's out of the way, and if you watch an LEC, you are getting playoff vibes from these GSL groups. Like, they're actually real series. And it's interesting. There's upsets, and they mean something when they have upsets, not a BO1. Unfortunately, when you then do finish watching LEC, like, click over on the old 80s TV, let's watch the LCS. We're back on the BO1. That's still, I'm still watching them play Dig in a BO1. Like, I'm sorry, the format alone is making that look whack, just like I've kept making that prediction. I think once you see the MSI format and then you go to Worlds, you're going to be really disappointed. You're going to be like, why can't I just have what is in the other region? If I was an LCS fan, right, you're going to think it's early days. It isn't. I've seen all these formats play out. By the end of this, I'd say this split, by the end of this year, you better be begging for something like what they've got in LEC for LCS. Because, by the way, I'm not a huge fan of LCS at the moment. I told you, like, beyond, like, FlyQuest and teams I think can do something internationally, I don't really care about, like, that Team Liquid squad. I think they haven't really got enough firepower. But I'll tell you what, if they were in, like, a group, like we're in an LEC now, and they were playing, and it was like, oh, will they, like, beat out, like, 100 Thieves for the second spot? So then I'd be interested. I might tune in for that series. You know, it'd be pretty interesting.
I mean, I think the problem is like, outside of EG 100 Thieves this coming weekend, like, this is a super week that's coming up this week, but there really isn't any interesting games. FlyQuest has already beaten all of the good teams, and literally their schedule is Immortals, TSM, CLG. Not to say they won't get upset, because that's just what happens in super weeks, but you know, the level of hype is pretty low.
We need new terminology. That shouldn't be allowed to be called a super week. That should have to be called a Clark week, because that's Clark Kent. He hasn't even got into the fucking telephone booth. He hasn't transformed into Superman. There's no good games there. Shit. That's just a lot of bad games all at once, basically.
The thing is, Clark Kent is still a good-looking human being, and there's really nothing good-looking about this coming week of LCS.
Yes.
More like a Bizarro week, if you will. But anyway, I think the LCS format, now I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but it couldn't be changed this year, guys, because they had changed the format, changed the days so many times. They actually just made a promise to the owners that they wouldn't change the format until next year at the earliest. So I do think they will change the format next year, for what it's worth. But they had already kind of locked themselves into this in terms of their partnerships with the teams. And so here we are, another year of boring format. I actually think probably the league itself would have liked to have changed the format this year, but was just kind of unfortunately locked in. Now, do I think they're going to switch?
I don't know if I believe Riot actually does what they like. First of all, isn't that the same Riot that during the playoffs was just like, actually, all other teams, like, we're just going to give EG a free sub in, like, upgrade position? Like, what are you talking about? They had everyone lock in. Literally, by the way, the word lock in implies you can't unfucking lock it later. So as far as I can tell, Riot do whatever they want, mate. So I'm amazed on this case if they're actually, like, honoring their word.
It would also take the Riot brain trust, because you know that it takes them 10 years to decide a new format, even though we know that the formats are bad. It would probably also take them a 10 years, you know, a long time to make sure that they are going to have a format that works for 2 days a week, because I don't think there's any way they moved LCS with its current viewership to 3 days a week, because the expense of running an extra day in Los Angeles would be absolutely astronomical. And it just isn't justified, especially as we know, they're losing sponsors, lost FTX, lost Bud Light, lost State Farm, and their viewership Well, it's been doing fine, actually, so far. It's almost up to the same number of concurrents that it was last spring, except we haven't hit playoffs yet, so it might actually be more. Probably fewer of these people are North Americans, going to make it more difficult to sell, and it's not a super big difference. But I think it is a good start that they've gotten approximately the same number of viewers after moving the dates and times. And I think ultimately that will prove to have been a good move. But this is going to be a process, and I just don't see them going to 3 days a week. I just don't see that happening in NA.
Right, let's talk about LEC then, because as I say, we've not only gone on to the groups, but there are basically the upper bracket part is done, and we know the 2 group winners. So Group A was shockingly won by Koi, which, remember, Group A was the one that had Vitality, who a lot of people thought was the best team in all of LEC, and then SK was obviously the team that caused all those upsets and beat the top teams. Koi not only beat SK, they then 2-0'd Vitality as well. So there's one shocking one. The other one a little bit less shocking. People pretty much expected G to win that one. Maybe not to give up the game to BDS. They did beat Mad Lions a bit easily. So then we got the lower bracket ones to decide the second spot. So let's talk about some of these first. Like, what do you think of the Vitality issue? Because obviously the key thing here is, Monty, is if it was in the round robin thing, everyone, like, even when they would lose a game, you'd be like, who cares? No problem. Like, this actually does make you think there are some... It's not all just fucking sunshine and rainbows in Vitality. Like, that bot lane issue, it's an issue now. Like, you can't just survive a million games and never get your bot lane. Like, that she tested and have to do something.
I mean, if anything, I think the takeaway here should be that in a meta that is played so very, very hard through the bot lane, it is kind of amazing that we are looking at a team that has had a very ineffective bot lane so far. I mean, Vitality... this bot lane is committing crimes in the bot lane right now. Like, I just don't understand what's even going on, because we know these players are better than this. Vitality picked up Carter, that was Misfit's coach, so he's worked with Neon in the past.
Yep.
Now, Kaiser is probably the biggest offender, because they seem to just irreparably damage their own lane at level 1 or level 2 into every single game. And a lot of that is Kaiser playing too aggressively or not knowing how these matchups work in terms of trading, which I think is just very strange. Because the thing is, the meta has been more or less set in the bot lane ever since Worlds. Well, I guess, we didn't see a lot of Zeri at Worlds, but we saw a lot of Zeri in summer. So it's been very similar for the last 7 or 8 months. And so these players should have a pretty thorough understanding of the bot lane at this point in time, and how these enchanters and push matchups work. And it's just baffling. Like, I just don't understand how this can even happen, right? And I'm not sure if there's an outside factor or if Kaiser just needs to be benched for a bit. But Neon also isn't performing. Is it up to carrying in the late game a lot of the time? But it's giving his team just no opportunities to play the game of League of Legends.
Yep.
I mean, in this series that they played against Koi, I don't even know how good Koi is. Now, Koi has obviously improved significantly, but the games were lost so quickly in this best of 3, especially the second game, which was just outrageous what was going on with the early Nautilus death, Bo on red side having to path from all the way from his red buff at level 2 to try and salvage the bot lane, which made it a very easy read for Malrong on the Jinzhao just to camp the lane and counter gank. And it was just doomed. And then you see the rest of the players having, it started in the draft, right? Because the Nidalee comes out because they need somebody to carry these games. And it just reeked of desperation from the coaching staff and players, knowing that they couldn't rely on their bot lane. So Bo is going to have to play a Nidalee. And Nidalee has been played worldwide, and we've seen it really dominate some games. Like T1 has used it against some pretty poor opponents, but it's usually for styling on bad teams.
It's more like a Canyon disrespect pick.
Exactly. Or in the LPL, it's used on certain Nidalee specialists in more or less desperation situations. And even in those situations, it really hasn't worked out. So to me, I was like, wow, you guys in game 2 are already resorting to this. Truly, you must think this is bad. Then he has to cross map gank at level 2. That doesn't work. He falls behind even further. Then Photon has to try and make outplays in the top lane. and it just reeked of desperation. And there is something like really wrong with what is going on, and I don't think it's unfixable because I just refuse to believe that Kaiser and Neon are this bad. It's just weird. So if it's a lack of synergy between these two players, maybe you have to make some sort of at least temporary substitution. If you have to go out potentially of this stage, at least you have time. I will say one of the nice things about the LEC format is the worst teams have time to make adjustments now. Sure. It's not like you could, you know, if you are Fnatic and Excel right now, you literally have weeks to fix fundamental problems, which was always an issue with the League of Legends calendar. You couldn't actually address issues. You could only slap band-aids on them because you couldn't fix deep issues with the teams because there was no time. There was no time unless it was between splits. And usually then you'd be making a roster move instead of actually trying to fix the issue. So if Vitality goes out early, I don't think they will. I think they will still beat Heretics or SK in the bottom match, and then they will go into the bracket and immediately lose. That's my prediction. But if they're out now, it might actually be a good thing for this team because they are stacked with way too much talent to be performing in this questionable of a manner.
I'll start on almost the reverse order there. I also agree, right? The most obvious thing that I immediately think is just change one of the two players. But notice I say one. I don't say change the whole bot lane. No, the reason why I think it's obvious you change one is this does look like an XL situation. Or I'll give you the flip side of it. Who the hell thought Kazi and Hylissang would have some secret fucking synergy and be like really good? Like the joke is on paper, that looked terrible. XL looked like good. This one looked like it should be a fine bot lane. Like sometimes what you hope for just doesn't work in the server. Like people just don't have the same communication system. They don't have the same style of play. Something just doesn't connect. Like obviously you see players where some of the players on the top side of the map were from game one were really good at ad synergy. And the problem, I said this to Dom even when Vitality was on top, is right, look, it's all well and good that that Photon turned out to be like 4 times better than anyone thought and was actually hard carrying through top lane. Just like that Chasey guy, to be fair, over on the fucking Mad Lions. Also another player, like just hard carrying, right? That's found money if you're Vitality. You didn't even plan for that when you made the team. You thought you had Perks, Bo, and then you had this really good bot lane. Like the premise should be for Neon, like you're saying, but he has his old coach. Just do what you did in that team. We don't. By the way, you don't have to smash your bot lane. Just get to the team fight. You're on fucking Sivir or whatever it is. Just do a team fight. Just win out, and that's it. But the problem is they aren't good in lane. There is no late game team fights. Like this team, by the way, the one time they had like a 50-minute game, it was a fucking abomination. Most of their games are fast, and they do when they were winning go hard through fucking top side of the map. So let's be real. Like this is not the LPL. You're not going to play hard through a carry top lane and win every game like that. You haven't got the shy in Europe. Like Europe is about mid lane primarily, but then late game is about the ADC and team fights. That's just what the region's always been. And typically top side is a weak side. So once you get to series like this, it's different in a best of one where you just get like a perfect draft, top laner gets it. In a best of 3, you're going to revert to the classic style of play. And that's going to at some point involve bot lane having to do something. And let's be real, you can maybe forgive the Koi one. Even though, remember, Koi's bot lane wasn't doing that well in the previous phase. That's why Koi was bottom of the league. But, mate, it's the Heretics one, right? Who the fuck's even praising that team? People, by the way, as far as I can tell, are still like, does this Mercer guy just have, like, dirt on someone and know where all the bodies... How does he keep getting in these teams? No one ever praises him, ever. And Jack Spectre only really gets praised for, like, the odd flashy play. And in general, people still think he's just, like, whatever. He's just an okay LEC. So, like, again, you're not going against monster bot lanes, you know? You're not going against, like, the fucking G2 bot lane right now. Like, that's why I'd be alarmed if I'm Vitality, because quite frankly, if Bo and Perks don't get it done, they're not going to win these games.
Yeah. And I think that's, and Photon, like, I think his performance, as you say, has been extremely good.
I mean, you know, from his role, like, it's really hard to, like, single carry a game from top lane at this point if you're an LEC team.
Yeah. It's just that so much of the game right now is played around these bottom lane matchups, and it's played around these late game AD carries. I mean, well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, you have these pushing lanes.
You notice,
right?
By the way, Kaiser also is never
very...
playing those ADCs as well. He's not playing any of the shit in Korea. It's just not. It doesn't bring it out. Where is it? Dude, this guy used to be the one with all the weird picks, the Wukong and the fucking Pantheon. Like, those are really good picks in Korea when they were fucking on.
Yeah, I think the meta will shift back. It seems like Riot is really pushing to kill the Enchanter meta, or at least balance it out with some forms of Engage, just because Engage supports and the Engage support items are so weak right now that we can tell based on what they're doing with the upcoming patches that actually it should swing back into Kaiser's favor. And Kaiser, as you note, has either been playing Engage or weird bruiser supports for a lot of this time. Back when he was kind of on top of the world with Mad Lions. And he really was a meta innovator worldwide,
Yep.
as you note. I mean, having the Wukong support was something that trickled out into other regions very actively. And it was part of Mad Lion's success when they were at their peak. So I think that the meta will move back in Kaiser's favor. But in the interim, there's a lot of nuance to these matchups, and it's not, as I was about to say, it's not just about these late game carries. That's a big part of the meta, but so much of it is about early trading with AD carry supports, right? Pushing lanes, getting dragon priority. There's a lot of different ways you can play the bot lane right now. As much as people complain about this meta, the bot lane meta is really, really interesting at the moment, and it's really diverse. So
I mean, the joke is you can unironically flex fucking Caitlyn. Like, if you've never seen Kerry or someone play Caitlyn, go watch it, guys. You have to check it out.
And if you've seen Beryl play Caitlyn or Sword Art play Caitlyn, maybe don't watch that. But.
Yeah, it depends if you're good enough. True.
But there are these opportunities, right? And I think it is fun to see how many ways the players have figured out to maneuver these different champions. And we've seen engaged supports come back into this meta, especially as a lot of the more poke or push oriented ADs and supports are banned out because we see so many different ADs. But name another meta where we're having all of, utility AD carries played at both AD carry and support, where we have Draven being an active part of the meta, Caitlyn and Lux together, Ezreal, Karma, Varus. Now we have Nautilus and Renata Glass returning depending on the lane matches. We have a lot of Soraka all of a sudden again, as these players have to go very deep in the pools with the number of AD and support bans that are coming down. So I think that this is really interesting. And it doesn't fit into everybody's wheelhouse because you are going to be rewarded if you are a mechanically gifted support at 80 carries, or you're an enchanter player, or both. It is tough times to be an engaged support player right now. It is tough times.
By the way, one thing about the format that is absolutely fucking up Reddit is, you might know this, Monty, but famously Reddit mods, or as me and Richard called them, the overglorified janitors of the internet, right? Who imagine they're the CEOs and sort of taste makers of fucking culture creators of the company. Again, just fucking shut the fuck up, look at the ground and mop the floor. That's all you're here for is when someone pisses their pants in adult diapers and some shit leaks out, you clean it up. That's it. You don't come in and tell people what's good. So anyway, those people, right? If you remember, one thing they love to do to have a semblance of power in their lives, which obviously in their real lives, they have no control over at all. Again, look into who these people are. It's outrageous. Like, they are the Cartman playing World of Warcraft fucking South Park meme, if you know, like, me, like fucking tendies or whatever, like that's real. So most of them are like that, right? But the craziest thing of all to me was this. You might remember they made a rule years and fucking years ago at this point in time, where the rule went that they were going to not allow you to have spoilers, remember, on the front page. Well, do you know the problem with that, Monty, is that when you play the groups like this in LEC, you're not allowed to have a thread that says the two names of the winners playing each other. So you'll never find a Koi versus Vitality thread, because logically that would give it away, and there has to be a 24-hour moratorium on spoilers. Which is why you might even notice, even when you do an interview like you win Worlds, you have to carefully phrase the thread. Like, it's mad, because the stupidest thing is, one, Riot style, you just created that arbitrarily as a rule. Like, one day, 10 years ago now, someone just went, there shouldn't be spoilers for 24 hours. What reason? Look, never mind. I decree, and it's just done. And then once it's set in stone, you can never change it, because how dare you question the wisdom of the mods? How dare you come before this council? We do not grant you the title of Jedi Master, right? Obviously they're on that shit. But the worst thing about it is like, do you know how much that fucks content in the ass? By the way, that within 24 hours of the match, think about this, Monty. When it's like 4 days later, are you actually going to care that much about like an interview with like one of the Super Bowl winners? Like, you're not really. Like, you want to see it right after the fucking game, don't you? Like, the last thing you'd want is like, winner of game says game was good and it's the game-winning play he'll remember forever. That's garbage. So already that's fucked it up. So anyway, if you talk about the Koi angle on this one, I actually think it's hilarious, because this just shows what, in many ways, Koi is the same rogue they always were. Because even when they win, and 2-0, by the way, what were called like two of the top 3 or 4 teams in the region, everyone's whole shit is like, The other team sucks, and I still don't really know if Koi's actually any good. And here's the thing.
I mean, it's kind of true in this situation.
I don't either. Like, as a team, I still think the roster's flawed, but let's be real. Just like kind of like why people still don't get why the Excel and Fnatic teams are bad. Let's be real. Koi still has some very good players. Like on these particular days, if you were like going hype about perks and caps, well, Larson just reintroduced himself, didn't he? He had some fucking massive games. Like, did people forget about this guy? Like, remember, he is always going to have CS leads. He's always going to have his picks. People don't even credit him over the years. Like, in one series, he just played Silas. Like, that was just something he would pick when he had to in a playoff series. Like, this is one of the best players in the LEC. And he just reminded of us it because we got to the format where you have more games.
Yeah, I think that Koi... For whatever reason,
they're also built for best of threes. By the way, they look like that team. If you know, like LCK, the team that it's like, if you go those sorts of teams, it's way better form for them than a BO1.
Which is hilarious because the majority of this roster did very well in best of ones for a long time and failed in the best of series, but they have turned that around in the last year or so. And I think it was so bizarre that this roster was doing so badly, considering they kept 4 out of 5 of their players. And in theory, they shouldn't have actually switched their style too terribly much. I mean, the reason they added Shigenda was because they wanted more flexibility to play carry top laners. But at least at the start, it's not like he's not capable of playing a more passive role within the game as his team acclimates to him. So I don't think that they should have had the number of issues that they presented early on. But I mean, towards the end of this...
Spoiler, I don't believe they actually even are trying him, mate. They just put him on Cassante. They were like, you know what? It's over. You are just a bad order army. Play weak side. So yeah, you're out.
And I think also you have to remember that Koi did beat Vitality in the 3rd week of competition as well. So, they are
obviously people were like, it doesn't matter because it was like whatever towards the end, but it is. It's still a win.
I mean, it mattered because Vitality was still fighting for one of the top 2 seeds. Yeah. I mean, it did matter. It did matter that Vitality beat XL in that last game of the season. That was that 50-minute insane bloodbath. Because if they lose that game, all of a sudden they fall down the rankings, and then maybe they have to play a tiebreaker, right? So I think what happens here is, Vitality did care about those games in the last week of competition. They lost to Koi, and it wasn't like what we saw with G2 losing to Mad Lions, where G2 pulled out this weird Swain mid Karma top build Radiant Virtue on Swain, deal no damage composition that was just bizarre, and I don't think was going to be a reflection of how they were going to play in a best of 3. I mean, the Koi Vitality match, like, I think this is potentially just a bad matchup for Vitality. I mean, that was the game where Trimby was constantly hitting perks with the Ash arrows out of the mid lane. And guys, that is so disrespectful, okay? So let me explain how that game actually went down. I did a VOD review of it on my stream. It was actually not the greatest play for Trimby to continue to fire Ash arrows at the mid lane. First off, because they didn't actually get very many kills on perks or damage on perks from doing that because he's playing LeBlanc. But secondly, because Neon and Kaiser were given a lot of room in that bot lane and they could play more aggressively because they knew Ash arrow was down. This was so disrespectful of Trimby that he was just going to throw arrows mid because he didn't feel he needed them bot lane because he thought Neon and Kaiser were so bad that they were just going to get through this laning phase and he could just shoot arrows mid all day for free. Just use his ult all day for free. And again, this is level 1 Ash ult. It does. People will say, oh, Ash ult is always up. Well, not if you don't have a lot of ability haste yet. Not if you have it at level 1 necessarily, right? So in the early laning phases of this game, just to toss these Ash arrows willy-nilly into the mid lane really did allow Neon and Kaiser to farm more effectively and play more aggressively in the bot side of the map. That is a thing that happened. But overall, this game wasn't very close, right? This game wasn't very close. And Koi came back and they just did it again to Vitality. And I think that was a very legit win by Koi in the best of 1s. And it's a very legit win that we saw in this best of 3. Like, this is the Koi that we expected to see. Maybe they're not in the top form that they were coming off the summer split, but they certainly were underperforming previously and should be among the top 4 teams in the LEC.
Yes, to me, even when I had them before, I think I had them fourth or third. Like I had them as the team. Actually, maybe I'm lying. Maybe I had him second or third. I think no. I think I had him about. Maybe I had him third. But the thing I will say about their team as well, which you saw in this series, absolutely in this phase of the tournament, is when the bot lane actually can perform and comp is on his game, mate. It will always in this team. I'm telling you, I've seen this guy play like what? This is like a fifth split now. Somewhere. Trimby's champion pool is mental, mate. There are so few Western players like this. Like, think about it. He always has a huge champion pool no matter the meta, Monty. Even when they have engaged spots, by the way, he can play Thresh and stuff like that. But when you have these enchanters like this, he is just in his element. Like, his Soraka's just different. Like, there's a reason the others don't pick it. When he picks it, think about it, because their style is like the late game team fight. That's the perfect champion to have if you've got some fucking monster Zeri player or some carry ADC. Because I've always said the reason why Soraka, in some ways, it's amazing it doesn't really get the same abuse as some of the other like OP champions. Mate, when you play against it, when you've had all those years where it wasn't in the meta, it's like the zillion, your brain can't account for the fact in the moment, like, oh shit, I've just killed someone who can get revived. Like, so what you do is your brain goes, oh my God, we can get onto the ADC / mid laner. You dump all your ults in, but then the fucking Soraka just at last second, whoop, all the health comes back. You're like, what the hell? And you've wasted everything. Like, it's actually one of those areas. I know I've made this point many times in the past, mainly with LCS. Like, the West is so weird in League because it's just the fucking gimmicks of the champions that destroy half the Western teams. Like, it's almost like, this is why I feel so bad for coaches. I guarantee you, when they end the draft, the coach is telling players, like, remember the Soraka ult, like, watch out for the Zillion, like, remember not to, but it doesn't matter. Like, that just disappears off into the fucking clouds, and the players still just play like fucking crazed apes when they're in the actual like team fight or whatever. Jim, like, that's why I make all those points with the one on the Papa about how they all just greed, like when they just burn 2 ults in a flash to like kill the support, like worth. It's like, it's not worth at all. You like the equation on that one doesn't check
out. 30-second support timer on the it's 30-second death timer on the support, and the dragon's coming up in a minute and a half, and you're like, why did you do that?
Like, the joke is, if I was really cynical, I actually think, here's like an LS type comment, but I'll do it anyway. I think if you gave me, not even a top teams, give me like Live Sandbox, but let me coach them, and I'll actually coach them like to abuse every one of these flaws of Western teams. Like, I'll tell the support to just like show for no reason outside the Baron pit, sort of, oh, I got caught on a wall, and then they just dump all in, and it's like, yep, that's right, we had Dragon Timer in 30 seconds. Well done, boys. Or we just do a fight where it's like everyone just focuses their jungler, he's dead. Oh, Dragon's up, no smite. And you're like, the amount of things you could just mind game with these Western pros is nuts in it.
Are you literally just going to create a honey pot for
that's
Western
what I want
teams?
exactly. Not a sandbox, a honey pot. Exactly. Live honey pot. That'd be my alternate team I'm going to make, and it's just to trap. Exactly. It's not even to win. I'm not going to win worlds or anything. Don't be silly. This is just to trap, like because again, it's like that's why it's like the honey pots. Like, they go in like delicious. Like, help! I can't get out. I can't. Then just over. Then
you have to use all the pool party skins just to get them extra horny.
Yeah. Right, here's the thing though, if we flip over,
I want to go back to the Trimby point, because Trimby has been extremely good over the last 2 years, and I think he really came into his own last year in particular, where we saw a pretty good expansion of his style. Now, some people will say, oh, that's because he's good at all of these enchanter roles, and of course he has his like famous pocket Rakan pick, which is arguably his best champion overall. But and yeah, he hasn't played that many tank supports, so I think there are some valid questions about what he looks like in a tank support meta. But in 2 years ago, his most played champion was Rel. His top 5, actually, top 6. Let's go top 6. Rel, Rakan, Thresh, Leona, Braum, and Nautilus. And I think, to be fair to Trimby, we
must be a big fucking Core JJ fan. That just sounds like Core JJ champion pool from when he was the MVP, doesn't it?
Right. But I think when we think about Trimby, it's important to note that there really hasn't been a tank support meta in quite some time.
No.
And so, because in season, 2 years ago, he was substantially worse as a player than he is right now. So I'm going to be very curious to see, with his current skill set, what happens when he moves into some of these tank supports, because I think it's unfair to categorize him as this enchanter only player or a guy who isn't super proficient on tanks, when we haven't seen him as a more mature player in this meta. So I'm holding off on some judgment on that one.
Also, if you ever watch any of the comms of their team when they were rogue on it, he seems like he's also one of the main shot caller voices. Like he's always talking basically the whole time. So yeah, in general, I think he's just a banger player, isn't he? The problem is though, because he's playing like an enchanter, that's never going to be as sexy as the Thresh hook or the fucking Pike execute, is it? Like we all know that. So it's just one. It's just that's by the way, that's why they're so on brand as a team. Like what I loved about this team was, especially when they had fucking Odoam there. I always thought what made Rogue cool was they were all just people who had like the sort of like whack fucking things that people never credit you for. So the top's like, oh, he just plays tanks. Like there's no just plays tanks, motherfucker. Like I've seen a lot of people play tanks and be terrible. Like Odoam, there was a G. Then you have the jungler. Oh, all he does is just like gank all the time. No, what he did was like provide constant action and pressure in a way that like actually clearly like allowed them to be in position in the game where they could do what they wanted to do. Mid lane, oh, he just wins in CS every time. Oh, that's all he does at mid lane, just win in CS every time. I guess him and that Chovy guy must not be that good at mid lane. Like, what are you talking about? It's impossible to give me up in CS every time. Then you go, the ADC, well, it does late game. It's just hit all the shots on like Caitlyn or fucking Lucian or Jerry. That's the job of the ADC. That's what I hired you for. You understood the assignment. And then this guy just plays enchanters. Again, brother, like it's a bit like mid lane. Like all he does is play Orianna as here. Well, in that case, he's gonna have a career the entire time League of Legends is out. Like if you can play some of these champions that at the moment are in the meta, like again, even when the tank supports come in, Monty, it's not only those. Like, we're not going back to season 5 where it's like Braum into fucking Alistair. Like, that's not ever coming back. We're always going to have some enchanters. Like, some of them are always going to be in the meta. So, again, their team's actually just an underrated squad of players, really.
I think also the thing that people don't really understand is that there is a link between jungle metas and support metas because somebody has to provide engage, guys. Somebody has to provide engage. And the thing is that whichever role is going to be able to provide engage better is going to be relegated to doing that. And right now, it just so happens that we have some extremely good engaged junglers like Maokai and Sejuani and Vi that are super viable, right? And in that case, you don't necessarily have to get a form of hard engage from your support, right? Or your top laner. Because the thing is, in jungle, it's about what you can get away with. And if you can get away with playing utility in the jungle, that's almost always going to be the preference of the professional scene because you can provide that safely for your team while just playing a PvE game for the most part, right? So yeah, I think part of it's all kind of wrapped up into one thing because you typically, not always, not if you're playing a poke composition or some other kinds of comps, right? But those are more difficult to play and more fragile and require better teams to operate them, generally speaking. And having conditional engage is the name of the game in the professional scene. Conditional engage is the king of pro team comps, okay? And what I mean by conditional engage is, do you have to commit to a fight when you throw out that engage? If the answer is no, then it's conditional. So it's things like Sejuani ult, Leona ult, Ashe ult, Maokai ult. Vi ult would be all in, right?
Yes.
So it's not conditional engage. You are locked in. once you click that R button, you are just locked in. Like Xin he's got to go in there. You know what I mean? So having these tools where you can fish for engages is incredibly important to professional teams because it lowers the risk of them playing the game and allows them to find better opportunities. So that's what professional teams look for in these compositions. And if you're wondering why, these types of champions are popular, that is a huge reason why. And we always see choke control is another huge thing. It's why Caitlyn is so good, right?
Yep.
It's not that Caitlyn is the strongest mid or late game carry. She's not. It's because she offers insane zoning.
Same with Orianna, all those classic
champions.
Yeah, exactly. Classics. Yep.
So, but they're very specific reasons why these champions are played at the professional level. And yeah, as long as they're viable, and especially as long as you can get away with playing them in the jungle without getting invaded and absolutely shit on, then they will continue to be played in the jungle. The jungle is the dog role. It always has been. It always will be.
Fine if you want to see a game where just like this entire split, spoiler, if you're Yankos, you're not winning the split. I mean, at this point, it'd be hard to even make the next round. You're probably going to go out here and be like 5th to 8th or whatever, right? But if you are Yankos, the whole split is just about being like, remember me, motherfucker? I am actually really good. Like imagine what I'd do with the team. Like, dude, even against this Vitality Super team, like, mate, he was fucking sick on that Vi game. He was a monster. Like, this guy should be on a way better team. I mean, I've told the offseason story, but it just, like, the rest of the team's all right, but he's just way too good. He just is one of the best still.
For my own amusement, I'm kind of happy that he's on this team just because of the story you told with him and Evie, and it's just such a motley crew of players of different nationalities that
he must have a really good sort of like. He must have a very legit mental state, like to play as a pro and to not get down by any of these problems. Like he still clearly tries super hard in the games. He doesn't give anything up in that sense. Like, yeah,
I mean, I think he loves his job. And
yeah, I agree.
It shows in the longevity of his career and just his general high spirits and sunny attitude. And I think either they will replace players on this team, or he will go to a different team. But his individual performance has been really good.
Right, the obvious team we have to ask about, we did the Vitality one, is the SK one. Like I will say, when me and Dom did the Best Damn League show, obviously you can watch the VOD from last week where we had Grabs was the guest and we grilled him about Crown Shot and all that jazz. One thing that we did both agree on is we actually did both pick Koi to beat SK. And the whole reason was it's just classically the Koi style. And also the problem with SK is they made their whole rep now off the BO1s. And it was games that were single like stand-up performances. Like Certus would have a pop-off, but you would think to yourself, if this was LCK mate and they ran back 2 more games, does he really do it 2 out of 3? I don't know. That's the problem, especially not against Caps or these level of players. So I'm sorry, like SK, I didn't expect them to be sort of this whack, but I'm a bit underwhelmed because they definitely were looking very good in those BO1s. Like they earned their spot here in the like top states. Like they did, but this is why it's hard to have faith in some of these squads where you're looking for, you essentially, you're just hoping a player's way better than you expect. And some of them, remember, like the Executive guy, he has no experience in this scenario. He's still learning the LEC world of competition and what it means to play in a game, etc. So I don't know. I feel like some of their BO1 games maybe like overhyped them, got them a bit gassed up.
I think that, as I said before, there was a lot of buzz around SK because of their scrim performances prior to the start of the LEC split. I heard from multiple teams that they were doing really, really well in scrims. And that's not always an indication of performance, right? Because sometimes certain teams try really hard in scrims while other teams are experimenting, and the experimenting teams, even though they're better, getting smashed. And, some of the teams that practice like they do on stage actually have very inefficient practice because they're showing their entire hand, or they're just playing meta stuff that might be banned on stage. There are scrims where coaches go in and agree not to ban certain things, or a team will just not ban anything because they want to try the power picks. And if you get those power picks, you win, but on stage you don't get them and then you lose. So there's like a lot of different variables that happen in these scrim environments. But I did hear good things about SK. And I was disappointed in the first week, but they have become more or less the CLG of Europe, and by that I mean more than the sum of their parts, but without major star players.
Yep, exactly.
Now, I will say, unlike CLG, their bot lane does seem to be super legit. I think that one thing you can say is that Exakick and DOS are within the top 3 and arguably top 1 bot lane in LEC. I think you can make an argument about that. They have been really good so far, especially for newer players. And this is something you can build around. Now, what confuses me is I hate these Xayah picks that we see in LEC. It is a capitulation. They
seemingly lose every time.
Bot lane bitch pick. Yeah. And they seemingly lose. The only people who've made it work, I think, is G2. It is not a good pick, in my opinion, in this meta. It is I'm on my own. Nobody is going to peel for me, so I need a Xayah ult to get out of this situation.
That's why when Reckless picked it at the end, it was just like the ultimate diva moment of like, you know what? I haven't even got any teammates on this team. I have to just do it all myself, don't I? Yeah, you're right. It's the pity pick of the ADCs, isn't it?
So if I'm
saying, all right, guys, if you won't peel for me, I guess I'll just peel for myself then. It's like, all right, come on then. He's off the reservation.
I'm just saying, if I'm SK Gaming, right? Maybe I use my best asset, which is my bot lane, and try and play some carries in that bot lane. Now, granted, there were a lot of ADC bans, and Koi clearly knew this. I mean, I don't want to take away from Koi where it was targeted.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, but SK is also doing things like on blue side banning Ashe and Varus instead of just, I don't know, taking it. So I think it's pretty questionable that you ban Ashe on blue side, generally speaking, because if you can't play Ashe at support right now, you are probably doing something wrong. And if you're not willing to first pick Ashe, I think that's potentially a pretty large mistake within the current meta. It is just such an insanely strong champion right now. It provides so much, like we said, short cooldown, conditional engage with the Ashe arrow, provides tons of CC and team fights, amps the damage through Imperial Mandate of the rest of your team in very meaningful ways, can be paired with tons of different AD carries, allows you to, provides you a lot of pressure in lane, provides peeling for your ADC. It is just insanely good. Also provides really strong bullying with Hail of Blades at level 1. So you can go ahead and start winning that lane, pushing in and getting advantages, taking Drakes early on. It is a super good pick. It is a first pick worthy pick on the blue side, which is why we see it so frequently banned on the red side, right? So I don't know. I think SK, maybe they rethink their strategies coming into the next best of 3. I think they beat Heretics, and frankly, I would be very concerned about this matchup if I was Vitality.
An interesting stylistic matchup, isn't it? Because think about it, right? We've got like the monster bot lane versus the top side. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Also, SK beat Vitality in week 2. So I still think Vitality wins a best of 3 based on the kind of quality. I mean, their top side of the map is very good. I think they have veteran players who have been in these scenarios before.
Sure. Yeah.
And maybe Vitality can figure out, maybe in the next, they have a week to kind of address some of these bot lane issues and find something that works stylistically for them. So I still think Vitality wins, but I'm not super confident about that. I would put it at maybe like 55%. I think SK really has a shot with how strong their bot lane is in this matchup.
We move over and talk about Group B, right? Let's talk about Mad Lions, Monty, because you know what I said before about Photon? The joke is, like, Photon being so good in the BO1s has actually made the fucking Chasey guy, like, slip under the wire. Like, where was this guy found from? He's way too good to be, like, a nobody. Like, this player, like, there's no, again, this is one of these, like, it's different when you have a Bo coming into the league, or you know they're going to be really good. Like, this guy is just, like, constantly exceeding what you'd expect from him. And, like, he actually looks really good.
It's crazy because he spent a couple years on the bench at Damwon, and maybe during some of those periods he might have actually been potentially useful as an active substitute, because Damwon has been having streaky performances in top lane for some time. But no, I mean, I guess he was just in Europe for the summer season of last year in an ERL squad, and I hadn't seen this guy play before he came into this league, but both he and Photon have been extremely pleasant surprises. And I think Mad Lions overall has overperformed expectations, as we talked about in our show.
The eye test on the like, look, maybe they went wrong once with the Rika guy. Dude, the eye test on these coaching staff is fucking legit. Like, remember, Peter Dunn isn't there anymore, guys. You can't just keep saying it was him. Like, Mac and them, like, not only are they getting players that keep exceeding expectations, but they also, every time, the whole team just comes together cohesively.
Yeah, and I think with Mad Lions too, one of the criticisms that I had in our preseason ranking show was that I thought this team would be demotivated because they tried and failed to get rid of Elyoya or sell Elyoya on the market, which I thought would, if I was Elyoya and I knew that these motherfuckers were trying just to put me on the auction block and had totally failed on putting me on a potentially better roster, and I knew that I was going to be a free agent at the end of this year, might have just phoned it in this year, because obviously
he had 1.2 million reasons to hit the fucking Mad Lions GM, didn't he? Because he could have been in G2. Fucking hell. And I would just be looking over at that Yike guy going, everyone's telling me he's the king because he has 3 winning lanes. Like, give me those fucking lanes. Like, no, exactly. It would be so easy to get demoralized, of course. I wouldn't blame him.
Yeah, so when you look at Mad Lions, I think I'm surprised because they appear to be, I mean, credit to Elyoya for being more motivated and keeping on with his really excellent performance, because I think certain other players, like I said, would have phoned it in for this year, put in a middling performance as kind of a fuck you to Mad Lions, and everybody would have known, like, oh, this guy isn't trying so hard, he's still really good, and just picked him up. It's a similar situation that we might have seen with a player like Keen or BDD in Korea last year, who were just objectively quite terrible last season, but surprisingly, I guess unsurprisingly, now they're pretty good again, because it turns out when you're on garbage teams and you're demotivated, maybe you're not going to perform your best, right? So I am pleasantly surprised by how good this team has been, and Chasey was a good pickup for them. I was critical of the Carzzy Hylissang lanes, especially considering how badly Hylissang was doing towards the end of the summer season, and his performance at Worlds was not great either. But he and Mickey X have both bounced back in great ways.
I don't think it could possibly have gone better than this, mate. No, I don't think even Mad Lions believed it was going to be this good, this bot. Like, come on.
No. It certainly has exceeded expectations, and credit, as you say, to the coaching staff. Now, all of that said, this team, for like an LPL team, cannot hold a W for any length of time without immediately trying to throw it. I mean, I was actually in pain when they were playing this weekend, and Nisqy got this had this amazing play where he gets ganked in the mid lane. Chasey's there. He steals a Soraka ultimate with Sylas, heals up Chasey. They get a couple of kills. There's a support roam on the Leona, locks down a jungler underneath the turret. They're doing great. And then what does he do? Nisqy immediately turns around, runs it down the mid lane, dies under turret to a Draven, cashing in all of Draven's stacks, effectively just eliminating any kind of advantage or win condition they had in this game.
By the way, it is look back again, fans. Remember, the coach is saying, don't get the Draven to kill. Don't let the Draven get kills. That's the one thing he's saying before that draft ends. Exactly. That's the one thing he's definitely saying before that draft ends. But again, the like the moth to the flame, they cannot help but go towards their certain doom.
Yeah, and not only that, but he had just gotten a bunch of kills, so it was a shutdown kill as well. So he had a gold bounty. So it was Draven stacks plus a gold bounty. And I mean, it was just outrageous. It was just an outrageous play, because it was simultaneously both so good and so bad. It was a comedy of errors. You couldn't have scripted this more hilariously, where it went from holy shit, Nisqy, what a fucking play, immediately into did that play take all of your brain cells, and now you just don't have any more for the rest of this, rest of this minute? This is crazy.
And by the way, even though obviously, like, I was on the other side last split of the who should the MVP, like, I actually thought if I was going on Mad Lions, I would have taken El Yoyo over Nisqy. I don't think, by the way, it was a totally illegitimate pick. Like, Nisqy would be in my top 3 for the MVP for that split, but because he had like the playoffs and worlds weren't that great, people like were like doing that thing they love to do once. It's like, because in this different format you didn't do as well, you were obviously a fraud the whole time. No, like, you've seen it this split. By the way, he's having really good split as a fucking mid laner. He's had so many big games, like you're saying. He makes loads of plays. Like, the joke is, he's not even the old Nisqy you remember from years ago. He's not just following the jungle like some fucking pet. Like, he's actually making like stud plays himself now. He's
they put the jungle pets into the game, so Nisqy didn't have to take that job anymore.
There you go. And by the way, even though, look, I don't really have that much to say about Astralis in general. Like, they obviously did good to even get here. The one thing I will say is this, like, look, aside from the Younghoon guy, who just is legit, like, I don't know how he stayed on this team. The other player I want to shout out is Kobe. Mate, is this just one of the most underrated players ever? People act like he's trash. Like, he showed you in this series, he's fucking good, mate. Like, remember, his team has no business even being at this phase of the tournament. Like, everyone had them 9th or 10th. Like, this guy can just play fucking League of Legends at ADC. He's legit. Think about how many people he's outperforming. He's also, by the way, outperforming Patrick and Reckless and, like, give me a Neon. Like, this guy's doing well, mate.
I also don't even mind what they did in the game 3 versus Mad Lions, which is put Junghoon onto Twitch and then put Kabe on the Cassiopeia. If ever anyone
was going to go off, you'd figure it'd be him, wouldn't you?
Yeah, so first off, Kabe's been playing well, and you could take a Ziggs. So teams have been doing this. They usually take a Ziggs in this scenario and try and just farm, wave clear into the turret. But I think the Cassiopeia is super interesting, especially into an Aphelios and, like, having a kind of less mobile, shorter range AD carry that could reliably get within range of Cassiopeia. But also dashes from Sejuani and Azir. That's something that Kabe can lock down with Cassiopeia. And especially because Junghoon made his name last year being active on the map.
Yes.
He was the roaming support. He was the playmaker. He was the spearhead that Astralis was playing around when they started to get better after they had him. It makes sense to me that you put him on this Twitch support and try and activate him on the map a little bit and play Dayor
so, by the way,
on a supportive pick with the Karma.
This guy, Jonghoon, was supposed to play in the LPL, dude. I'm telling you, like, he just has that mentality. He just goes for the players. I love it. He's actually a very entertaining player to watch. If you don't watch Astralis games, just look for the pop-offs he has, and they're worth watching. I'll tell you right now.
Yeah, so Astralis lost, but it's like we didn't expect them to win. They were a pretty heavy underdog, and I give them credit for trying to do something different in a game 3 that could have won them the game, and appears at least to really feed into their strengths as a team and their individual player strengths as well. So it didn't work, but I thought it was a good idea.
Yes. And by the way, you'll notice once he's breaking all these matchups down, that shows you how powerful bot lane is. Like, the joke is all Astralis has is the bloody bot lane, and they were still able to do something because the Mad Lions one is like a good but not godlike. But so bot lane right now is so powerful. Like, again, when we get to the LCK and LPL things, you'll see what we talk about there. Like, it is the fucking game changer right now. What about G2 then? Because obviously this was the team where people are umming and ahhing. Like, when they would have games towards the end of the best of one round robin, maybe they're not as legit. Some people think they should still be the best. They've also got Caps and all those players that you think of in your brain. They should always be smashing these series. What do you think overall of G2 right now?
I mean, I think they're quite clearly the best team in Europe. I don't think the play in LEC has been very good the last couple of weeks. I think overall there have been quite a few mistakes made.
Sure.
And I think especially in that second game that we were talking about where Niski made that misplay and gave Draven a bunch of gold, that it was kind of a gift. And so it was, when you do that to Draven right now, I think Draven is incredibly strong. He snowballs so crazily out of control that if you start that process, it can be really, really devastating effect in the late game. And it's been surprising to me because I've never really thought about Draven as a late game AD carry, but I have been surprised by the current level of damage output that we have seen on this champion. And I think part of that is the change to itemization on this patch. If you watched LCK this last week, there was the KT upset over Gen.G. Aiming was playing Draven, and the combo of Shield Bow, Infinity Edge, and Bloodthirster was just doing insanely dirty things in that game. So it seems like he is just doing a crazy amount of late game damage now, in addition to being a immense lane bully and a huge snowballing threat. And so if you let him into the game, and if you let Hans Sama, who is obviously a notoriously good Draven player, have these opportunities, they are going to be able to close the game on you. It's just Draven is really, really strong right now. And I think the reason you're not seeing more coverage of the fact that he probably needs to be nerfed is that not every player plays Draven. So I think it can deceptively seem like a pocket pick that certain players are strong on, rather than just an extremely strong all-around pick. There's very few, I think, downsides to playing Draven right now. Another thing that we've seen from G2 is just running interesting picks, like Lilia, coming into these playoffs. And I think that was pretty savvy from G2. Let me pull up the drafts they were using, if I can find them.
I mean, they played it twice against BDS. The games they won, they had the Lilia.
Yeah. Sorry, the drafts aren't up on Leaguepedia right now. So when we look at some of the Lilia picks that they've been using, again, Lilia, as we said earlier, was a form of conditional engage that they have decided to pull out. You can combine this with
brilliant for a rookie jungler. Think about that. Like, he doesn't have to go in. He doesn't have to commit.
Also,
way more of a gamble.
Yeah, insanely good at kiting as well. And when you're playing, they've been really preferring to play mid lane AD champions. So like Jace and Tristana, which again, Jace can speed boost and kite backwards, right? You're getting that poke. Tristana can kite very effectively as well using her W and her ultimate. So it allows you to create a pretty significant amount of space and, gives you flexibility to play AD mid laners as well. So in general, I like it. G2 tried to play the Bel'Veth and the Xayah. Not sure what that was about with BDS, but I do think the Zilia the Lilia picks with the Jace have been really, really effective. Also allows you to set up some pretty big Jax plays as well for Broken Blade, again, based off of putting people to sleep, setting it up with a chain CC with the Counter-Strike, and then getting the Jax activated and in the fight. So I like it.
And the difference between G2 and Vitality, to contrast them, is if the top side doesn't win for G2, they still have that bot lane. The bot lane's really good as well. So the thing is, their team all around, like basically the only weakness essentially is like the Yike angle. And then if the rest of the team's doing great, his weakness is covered. Like you've actually, and as you're saying, even you can tell the way they draft and pick, they're clearly like, they're not just setting this young guy in the jungle, in the deep end and going, swim. They're telling him, like, so we're going to build it up like this. Yeah. You're going to do this early. You're going to go with him. Like, watch for the, like, again, the coaching staff's killing it in that team. And the good thing is, even though Caps certainly doesn't, like, snap every game like he used to, the difference is this. When Caps does get fed Monty, he carries every one of those games. That's the difference, I would say. Like, he's one of the only players in the LEC right now. You can guarantee pretty much when he gets ahead, he's just going to fucking win the game. So, like, all around, just a really nice all-around team. I agree with you. They have to be the best right now.
I do wonder about the Yike stuff because it seems like when they try and empower him on these Bel'Veth picks, it's just not a super good idea. And that's fine. He doesn't have to be the star player of this roster. And this is my problem in general when people try and hype up rookie players. You have to remember that the effective way to introduce rookies is what we saw EG do with Danny and EG do with Jojo Pyun, which is like limit their champion pool, limit their agency on the map so that they can perform well, gain confidence, gain that experience, and then slowly start putting them on picks or in macro positions where they have more agency and their decision making can be activated. But I think with Yike, it's very clear that the coaching staff of G2 has been holding his hand in these early games, creating scripted plays, trying to set him up for success. And yeah, they're playing a playoff game with him on Bel'Veth. That's probably a really good thing for his confidence to start dipping his toes into the water of being that guy. But frankly, he doesn't have to be that guy on this roster. They have really strong lanes. So regardless, I think they're going to be okay. But you also can't over-evaluate the impact of a player like Yike when you're a jungler playing with these super veteran players who are among the top of their positions, and fans want to say, oh, this guy's immediately a god. He's playing on easy mode, guys. He's playing on easy mode, and it's not to take anything away from him. I think he has been good, but he's still clearly a rookie in many ways, and he's not the best jungler in this league.
Yes. Like, put it this way, if people don't know, it's also one of the things I always considered a strength, because I think Delafalco's in the same wheelhouse of Youngbuck. It's why when he had all those XL teams that used to narrowly miss the playoffs, everyone used to meme like, lol, how could he be that good a coach? Here's the question that I'll ask you that'll melt your fucking brain, right? Aside from Patrick, which of those players even ever did anything in another team ever? None. I could list every one of them. Like, they're all gone. The joke is, he was almost making playoffs with players, Monty, that just exited the league in pro play or went to ERLs forever and are just like they're like fucking, it's like those angels, like the demons that were fucking bound in Tartarus, like for 1,000. You'll never see those players ever again. Like, that's how you know, because Youngbuck's skill basically was like that. He would figure out, like, essentially, right, oh, you're going to have issues here. So the band-aid is, you just have a 3-champion pool. You play these 3 that you're comfortable on, then I can build the draft out. Now I know what I can give this jungler here. I can give the fucking top laner this. He would just build it up like that. And it's just an effective style. It's why people like Youngbuck and Dylan Falco, when they have the middling teams, just get way more than you expect. Like, they'll just turn those players where you're like, I didn't think he was good. Like, you can just survive in the game. Whereas there are the people where, I won't name names, but I've seen people who've coached really, really, really top teams where you just think you're a genius in the draft because your ADC can play like 6 things top lane. It's like, the other guy doesn't have that luxury, mate. Again, you're playing on, not always easy mode, but easier mode. You're playing on normal mode. Some people are playing on nightmare mode. That's the point. And spoiler, if you're a coach of XL, you're always playing on nightmare mode because it's XL in it. So Get more about that later, maybe.
Also, I think now that we've seen 10 games from these teams and we're over the initial hype of, Yike being added to this roster, I think it was still a bad move to trade Jankos for him. Having watched Jankos' performance,
Yes.
I think this G2 roster is better with Jankos. Going to slide that one in there.
And remember,
been good, but he hasn't been as good as Jankos.
If they'd accepted the offer, I have to imagine them with El Yoya, mate. If this team had El Yoya, like, again, let's go to MSI. Let's see what can fucking happen. Because there are some LCK or LPL teams could get that second spot there. Might be interesting. Might be real interesting if you had fucking Jankos or El Yoya in this G2 lineup. Like, they could come with gas with this lineup. So, yeah. Right. What about, obviously, people thought BDS was going to be a meme. And just in general, they're not, mate. Like, they're not, I actually am mad impressed with what they've done with the BDS squad. Because remember, they didn't even bring in big names, Monty. It's not even like they got some monsters. Like, they're not the ones who got Jankos. Like, this is another team that looks well coached to me. They've managed to find, like, ways to make players I thought were busts. Like fucking Nuclear Int's having games now in best of threes where we have to watch them. Like, I thought this was going to be another player consigned to hell. Also just never to come back to the RLs like the Checker lads of the world. But they're making it work in this squad. It's actually like a fun team to watch even.
I actually really like watching them play. I do think that they probably have flaws that are rather irredeemable once we start getting into these serious best of threes. But I say that, and I also think that BDS might be the second best team in Europe. I mean, that's not an outrageous statement to make, having watched those G2 games.
Have a good chance to prove it against Mad Lions, potentially, right? If they can get there.
Yeah. I think so. Adam's been very good. And I like the fact that Adam is playing his own style. He always did that. The thing is, and people will say, oh, well, Adam was so good on Fnatic. No, when he was doing this before, he was actually just a liability and they had to prop him up. Now he has been able to integrate these champions into the professional scene in a sense where he is very additive with these picks. He's also in a position where some of his champion picks are actually fringe meta, which they were not at the time when Fnatic was playing. It's not like he's the only dude playing top lane Olaf in the universe anymore. We do see that in LPL, right? We do see that in other regions where there are carry top laners that want to mimic his style. So it's a factor that he has both gotten better at playing these champions at the professional level. His team is playing around them in a better way too. Although I would argue Fnatic really did kind of bend over backwards to work with his style when they brought him into the roster. And we're seeing that these picks are I think significantly better on a global scale than they were when he was initially bringing them in. So this is all to say he's having a very good split. Shio he's been very good on Wukong and like acceptable and other champions. Crownie and Labrov have obviously been performing very well within their own right. Nuke has been doing just fine in the mid lane. This team has their own flair and their own style. They're weird to play against, which is obviously a pretty distinct advantage. They look more like an LPL team than most other Western teams. And by that, I mean, they may be limited, but they are effectively using the tools that they have.
Play to your style, yes.
Yeah, play to your style. That's what LPL teams do, guys. Like, you have 17 teams in the LPL. It is very difficult to prep for a specific opponent. The talent is spread across all of these different rosters. So you really do, in the LPL, have to figure out what you're good at and then and you play so many games. You play, there's 7 days a week of games. There's 16 best of threes a week. It's outrageous. So you don't really have time to prep, analyze every opponent that you have. You also just don't have the players, if you're not a top 3 team in the LPL, to play a variety of different styles. You are working with some player on your team is going to be somewhat limited or somewhat of a specialist within a certain champion pool or a certain style. And so they've gotten very good at just ramming that style down your throat over and over again. And it makes for interesting matchups. It makes for kind of crazy ass games. And BDS is doing that basically. Am I super convinced that this team is going to win LEC with this roster? Obviously not. Like, they're not the most well-rounded team of all time. There are ways you can, use pick and ban to take away certain strengths that this team has, which forces especially their bot lane and their mid lane to step up if you start really pinching the jungle and top lane pools. But it is annoying. And I think the problem is that if you start to aggressively ban against Adam, you inevitably are going to let meta power picks fall into BDS's hands. And guess what? Those meta power picks are probably going to be bot lane power picks, and Crownie and Lebrov have proven that they are capable of carrying. So there is a threat here, and there is a style, and I think they can be quite good. I think it's kind of a coin toss versus Mad Lions. They both have their flaws, as we discussed with Mad earlier, but BDS has certainly overperformed, and at the very least is a very fun team to watch.
Yes. And if anyone just hasn't been specifically watching the players, like if it keeps going the way it's going now, Crown Shop will absolutely be on a better team in the future, or BDS will upgrade. Like he just looks too good. He actually, and sure, he didn't look so great in like this G2 series, okay, but like aside from that, he's worked miracles. If you consider the team he's on and all the rest of it, like he's been really good.
Yeah, he's been great, and it again just raises the questions about what was going on last season when he was
actually
good.
Here's an interesting detail for you, because I had grabs on that episode.
Sure.
One detail he gave, and mate, if he could have just said this even privately last year, it could have changed the narrative completely. Here's a key detail, Monty, because when he was the coach of VDS, and spoiler, don't worry, Grab's got fucking a very nice contract for that. The joke I even had for him was, that's actually how sports works, mate. You don't actually get paid while you're really good. You get paid after in the next contract. What you do is you get paid for what you did and what they then think you can do. So don't worry, he got like essentially what should have been his G2 money in BDS, right? He wasn't just tasked, Monty, with having an LEC team. He had to essentially operate that and the academy team. And because the ERL team, remember, was a top, it's like a major, one of the, like the main thing of the org, right? He had to also try and win like EU Masters with the academy team. So his logic was, when he decided he wasn't going to go with like the fucking Crownie limit bot lane or whatever, his logic was, right, since because he had like, I think it was like, he didn't like work at something to do with like attitude or something. He thought like X-Matty's attitude was a selling point for the culture of the team. His logic was, right, look, it's not like if I put them in LEC, I'm going to win LEC. But I have to try and win EU Masters still. So he was trying to sort of operate. But yeah, if you put that in, that actually shades it quite differently. It doesn't seem as harsh thing. It's not that he really sat down and went like, X-Matty is just much, much better than crowd shot. It wasn't as simple as that, guys. So I'll just say that for a piece of information for everyone.
Also, to be perfectly cynical, the better you do in EU Masters, if you have those players under contract, you can actually sell them for a lot of money to LEC teams. Whereas there is no penalty for doing badly in LEC. You get to keep your spot. It's like so the actual cash value of pumping up your ERL team may in fact, I don't know the exact math, I'm just theorizing, it might be better than having a good LEC team in some
I would imagine it is, because logically, if you go and look, mate, how many fucking players has Carmine Corp tricked LEC teams into signing that just were just like average as fuck? Like the joke is, but they were winning LFL and EU. Yeah, we've heard that story a million times now. Like, look at the 113 guy, he could just fuck right off out the league. I don't even care, mate. I'm not one of those people like, but give him a chance. No, I didn't like him before. I didn't want him to get a chance, and now I hate what I'm seeing with my eyes. So in some ways, I actually hate Fnatic and XL even more for making me watch him play. Exactly, he should be out already. So, but bringing it back, there was one point I alluded to earlier, which is, here's the sad news about this format and about the way that teams work whenever there's big names and super teams involved, Monty. You know how it works. The first person to get fired on a super team, always going to be the coach. Oh, I'll never be a player. What are you talking about? Players are gods who walk among us. We are mere mortals. If those players play bad, apparently they have no sentience or sort of their own choice of how they play. Do they go for it? It must just be the coach mind controlling. Because, mate, when they fired Youngbuck, like I've just said, even if you thought this split was bad, it was 3 weeks. It was 3 weeks. It was 9 games. And he's fired already. He doesn't even get a chance to wiggle around now in this, obviously doesn't get a chance to bring another player in. He can't have a sub or something. Essentially what you're implying there, guys, is it was just all Youngbuck and the coaching staff's fault. Like they're just them. Apparently we were all watching with our eyes these players just wither and playing off like that, but it was just all the coaching staff. I don't get that one, you know. Yeah, I
mean, also they do have a mid lane substitute that they could use.
Never even tried him.
A professional level in Abadage, right? I think it's outrageous if those rumors are true about them getting rid of Youngbuck and Nelson. Well, first off, congrats to whatever team actually gets them, because they've proven time and time again that they are competent coaches. But second off, Youngbuck has done well by XL for years at this point in time. He made your rosters way better than they should have been. this team was very incrementally like getting better players, attracting better talent till we got to this point where they do have a lot of talent on this team, where they were getting good players. So unless there is some outrageous story, which I haven't heard behind the scenes about why this coaching staff should be removed, I think this group of players would. I mean, I watched. First off, by the way, guys, if you don't watch Excel's content, big credit to their content team, because their content team is actually putting out some really well polished, interesting documentary content at the current point in time. So you guys should check out, shout out to the Excel content team and the stuff that they're making. But if you watch those content pieces, which I was doing on my stream this last week, it's so depressing, guys. Like, these guys look just completely, their players just look completely shattered. They don't have any confidence. VTO is tweeting about how he's lost all his confidence, and that was the only thing he ever had. I mean, it's very French of him, right? But we talked about that on a previous show. Odo Omne is down in the dumps. It seems to really just be a motivational issue, and I don't think it's fair necessarily to pin that on the coaches. Sure, team atmosphere falls under them, but this particular group of players just seems to be fundamentally dysfunctional. And I think coaches can paper over the wound like we saw Yamato do with Fnatic last year, but I'm not sure that it should be their responsibility to heal the team in that way, or make a player change before you do that. I was just shocked they didn't put Abadage in their last week of competition. Also, was it really so bad? They almost beat Vitality. What is the difference in this story? In that 50-minute game that XL almost won. And remember, XL had nothing to play for, and they still played out of their minds in that game with determination to win. Not saying out of their minds in terms of quality, but they really, really, really tried to win a game that they didn't have to win. And if anything, if they win that game, do you fire the coaching staff, or you say, hey, we beat the #1 team in Vitality, and now we're going into this break with a confidence boost? But I think that game should have been a confidence boost no matter what, because they were so close to coming back, and because they did show a dogged determination to win that last irrelevant match for them. I think they ended on a high note. I think it was a heartbreaker, but I think if you took a look back at it a day or two later, you'd say, it sucks that we lost this really close game, but we fundamentally played a close game with the top team. At least that should instill a level of belief in our abilities, and we should run it back. We have 3 weeks to fix our problems now. Thank God we have this break. Winter Split is the most irrelevant. We ended better than we started. Let's fucking go.
I also want to say, because I saw there was loads of fucking Nelson haters just swarmed me. I always told you he was overrated, because if you looked up the LPL, the team that he coached, LNG, wasn't that good. Like, the way you're still on that fucking shit. Spoiler, Cadril was like just a below average jungler. You all worship him and every word out of his mouth. It doesn't make sense what you're saying. So do the results in the game matter? If they matter, then shut the fuck up telling me Kobe, who played in 2010, is some genius about League, and Chat knows everything. A fucking season 1 and season 2 joke. Like, give me a break. Like, which is it? Is it about the results, or is it about like what they know in their mind? Because here's the real thing I think's the problem with having Nelson in a team like this, based on some of the things I've heard, is because he is from that like hardcore Asian way of thinking about the game, which, by the way, I'm sorry, this is just how it is. It is negative, because the idea of how you become truly elite, if people don't know, here's the true dark secret about the Asian countries that have the super Confucian work ethic, Monty. It actually comes from telling yourself you're a piece of shit when you're 9 out of 10, and that unless you become 10 out of 10 and win, you didn't do anything. Now, the point is, would I want like my child to live life that way? Not like, I wouldn't want it enforced on them. I wouldn't want them to have to do that. I'd want it to be like, if they choose to be excellent at that, yeah. If not, you do what a Western parent go, I'd love you anyway, no matter how you perform. Come here, right? The problem is that isn't the style of how you do it in Asia. In Asia, because they have an infinite amount of input, especially in LPL of players, you really can be like, we're going to have I always used to say the Korean StarCraft system is one of the most disturbing fucking machines ever made, because it just churns up players, even great players. But the downside is, The fucking light they produce as they're burned out is fucking incredible, isn't it? It's on some Blade Runner shit. They burn half as long, but twice as bright. So the downside is they can just go, right, this guy didn't work, chuck him out, get another guy. Here's the problem. In EU and LCS, you're not doing that. You are working with a set of people, and some of them like are coming out of an ERL, or some of them are like players who haven't played very long. These people can't take harsh criticism. You have to, like, in my opinion, even in LEC, you're thinking of the G2 super teams that can take the harsh criticism. They can, because people like Perks have that mentality. They're a winner. Someone like Caps knows there's another level he has to hit. Some of these LEC players, guys, no, not joking, you have to babysit them a bit. You have to give them the compliment sandwich. You have to find some dog shit, basic shit they did in the game, like you warded well there, then tell them they fucked up the whole dragon control, then tell them, but you know, well done backing and getting a pink. You know, like you have to sort of do it like that. They can't handle if you're only hitting them with what we're doing wrong. And spoiler, in a team like XL, we lose every game. It's going to be all wrong all day long. And so, unfortunately, to me, it's not. I don't think it's even a case. It's just like Nelson. It's not. That doesn't mean he's bad. I think he's just on the wrong team. I think you need him on a team. Like he needs to be on a team where everyone has crazy aspirations and people essentially. It's like. People want to be coached that way. They almost want someone to come in and tell them you're wrong or don't do that way. So they know that's what this super, super elite player wants. I think it's just a mismatch in that sense, personally.
I mean, in a way, it may have been better on the last year's version of Excel with newer players like Marcoon that may have been a bit more hungry and moldable than having a bunch of more veteran players who had already tasted success.
All I'm going to say is this, right? You all know the flag and you all know the jokes. So let's just do a little rundown, shall we? Remember Soaz in that Misfits team? That was a bit sad, wasn't it? Remember Vethio in this XL team now? What about Hansama in Team Liquid, right? Are any of these players bad players? They're some of the best players to ever play in LEC. But if you put those French players on a team that is dysfunctional, doesn't get going early, Monty, and individually they have the odd bad game, they are going to collapse. The team's going to collapse. They're not the guys who are coming in like, we can still do it, guys. Believe it. That's not who they are. So unfortunately, like it is a trend that goes with the culture of that region. It just is. Like I would actually say that if you look even historically, but people like Adam, even when those players drop off, they drop off fucking hard, mate. They drop off real hard. So they're just. This is why actually I also think coaching in LEC is different from LCS. In LCS, you're coaching North Americans. The joke is Canadians and Americans aren't that different compared to like France and Germany are right next to each other, guys. Like, they couldn't be more different. So in LEC, you're coaching a crazy set of cultures.
You just offended all Canadians, by the way. All Canadians deeply offended. Americans, apathetic.
Well, obviously, you know, I'll give them the credit. Like there is that like French-Canadian part. That even used to be a joke when I was a boy in England. It would be like, you know why Canada is the worst place in the world? Because you live above the Americans, next to the French, in the snow. Used to be a good joke when I was a boy. Whatever, it's a pretty good one. It's not even that offensive. That's why I'm able to repeat it now. It's just good, wholesome fun in a pub. So where you're definitely over the correct age and drinking appropriately, of course. Never would suggest anything otherwise. But here's the thing: to bring it all back, though, like I'm just generally not a fan of that because, as I told you, it's the same in sports. The problem is this. There will always be someone for gigs that have money that'll go, yeah, I'll come in and coach, even though it's like halfway through the split, right? And so, unfortunately, the real problem is this, guys. Think logically about the team structure of orgs in League of Legends. So the general manager, technically, Monty, is the one who decides who joins the team. Notice those motherfuckers almost never get fired. They can just hire a million bad players. Evil Geniuses has done it in CSGO for 3 years. They can hire a million bad players. But what you do is, when they hire players that don't work out, they then go, essentially, it's like Formula One. You built a car that didn't work, and then you take the driver and go, why didn't you win the race, you idiot? You're like, what? I can only work with what I've got. No. Get someone else in here who says they can win the race. And then the other guy, you know what? I think I can make it work. Of course, they're going to say that to get the gig. So they always fire the coaching stuff first.
I mean, the other way Formula One works is you build a dog shit car, put you're a billionaire owner who puts your son in there because you're rich, and then blames the people who built the car.
Let's do the one too. Yeah, that's the other alternative.
There's lots of fun ways to do it in Formula One. The nepotism is out of control.
Yes, but here's the thing, though, Monty. People haven't properly thought this one through. To me, the most logical person you bring in now, it's so obvious, it's hanging over us. How is this not the elephant in the room, right? So what I need, Monty, is this. It's probably not about like inside the game stuff. I don't know, Nelson knows fucking everything about the LPL and what they're doing, all the secret shit. Youngbuck is really good at banding. Here's what I'm going to do. Because we've identified, Monty, the key thing, turns out the worst of the power rate, no, not power rate, the worst of Captain Planet's Planeteers was the most important after all. It was about heart, wasn't it? Where's that little guy who could control the elephants? I always used to think he was shit. I wanted to be the guy with the flamethrower, with the wind, whatever, earth. No, it turned out heart was what brought it all together. So here's the thing. If what I need to do, Monty, step one is turn the morale around and then start telling motherfuckers, you're not playing that in draft. The guy I'm recruiting instantly is called Yamato Cannon. He is sat there right now, and I bet he'd even take the gig, mate. Like, by the way, he's also someone, unlike a lot of people, who'll take a challenge on. He's not like a fucking coward and that's like, oh, no, it has to be great. No. I think that's the guy you hire, mate. If you fired Young Buck and that now, bring that guy and see if he can turn it around. Because, like we're saying, it's not even just the game stuff. It's not X's and O's going to fix this team. You've got to do something fundamentally about this squad. Like, they just don't believe in each other. I've heard behind the scenes it's terrible, mate.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what they're, let's put it this way, what they're showing us in their own show is probably the good version of that, and the good version looks pretty shit. I'm gonna be real.
I swear, I'm good. This time, I promised myself I won't give you all the leaks this week. I'm going to save some for Dom. He has to get some eventually. He can't keep getting cocked by you every time. But I will throw this out there. I did hear basically that there was a player on XL. Oh, that's right, players. Your coaches get fired. Well, you know what, motherfucker? You can go on the hot seat. So I won't say who it is, Monty, but I heard there was a player who unironically was done after the first week. And they all knew it. Now, can you imagine, again, remember what we said earlier, guy? Can you imagine the mental, like, fucking mountain you have to scale knowing that your teammate, you've got 2 more weeks, by the way, and this, again, it's going to define your whole initial split. You know he's checked out already. Like, guys, half of you can't even handle when the guy ints at level 1 in a solo queue game. You want out the game already, FF at trailer. This one, they have to keep playing professionally, all the scrims. They have to sit there with a guy they know doesn't care, Monty, in a VOD review, like, and then they have to go like, yeah, oh, I guess I could have done stuff that, you know what I mean? Like, mate, like, you can see how these things go really quickly. They go really quick.
It is depressing, though, because I think that team can be good.
Yeah. Oh, well, the sad thing is this. Are you ready? Here's what will happen. If you did bring him out to win, and maybe he gets like 1 player change, then all of a sudden they become like 5th best, and then he wins like coach of the split. And if you're Young Buck, you're like, really, motherfucker? You know what I mean? Like, really? Really, though? Is that what we're doing now, is it? Like, but that is what will happen if someone comes in. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, I think they did need a change. I just disagree that it's the coaching one. I think Nelson is just such an incredible resource because of his ties to all of the LPL coaching staff, and you're just going to get better info and better. He's just such a great scout beyond his own mind for the game. It's just like he can tap into that network of coaches and really get the very deepest info about what's going on in LPL, what's effective, strategies that are being utilized. Nelson just keeps you ahead of the curve, man, especially when it comes to international competition.
And I'll just throw this out there. Even though he's friends with him, Nelson even told me that, yeah, the Sword Art move to TSM would probably fail. So that makes Nelson already about 100 times smarter than Double Lift. Not that that takes much. Here's a little joke. I saved this one for you, Monty. I saved this one just for you, right? I did it on Twitter, but it's worth putting on someone at Insight. The joke is, Leena and Double Lift have nicknamed his brain Lenovo because it's a faulty piece of tech that keeps telling all their plans that they're up to. Pretty good.
Good.
Pretty good. It's pretty good. Pretty good. Because the joke with them, if you don't know, is you just have to let them talk and they'll tell you everything. They can't help themselves. Like, we'll get into it separately, but all you need to know is this, fans. I've pointed out in the past, me and Monty have TikToks, right? This is where you're going to love it. Because remember, TikTok, China, no copyright problems. All you need to know is this. You know, I've been super careful on my YouTube because I knew you can get fucked up like Richards did, etc., by people doing like claims against you and taking legal action. So I've never, people might know, on my channel featured like other people's stream content or in-game stuff. On TikTok, I can do that. So by the way, when Double Lift and Leena be saying all that stupid shit on Twitter or on their streams, I can just take that clip, show you the clip and react. So get ready. This is going to be the chapter of the Thorin verse you never even knew you wanted to know about. This is going to go ham. It's going to be fun.
Also, the pop culture clips have been very funny too.
There you go. Exactly.
I do recommend your TikTok.
Yes.
I know you saw this.
Monty's, by the way, is GenG MonteCristo, and mine is Thorin with 3 O's official, just like my Instagram.
There you go. Yep. Mine's the same as my Instagram as well. You can find in my link tree on my Twitter, in my Twitter bio too. Just click on right through there. But I know you saw this a little bit later, but I did because the fans demanded it. I found that Leena had done a like hour and a half reveal of
By the way,
DMs.
have these people ever even met a PR fucking person? Like, you know what I mean? Like, dude, how are they still going? You know what? I think I'll just turn the stream on, start telling everything from now. Like, yeah, go ahead.
Here's the story, guys.
Go
Here's the story,
ahead.
guys. Not many people saw this, but last week, Leena turned on her stream and she spent an hour and a half revealing screenshots of DMs that both she had received and Doublelift had received, which she did not say. I don't know if people said that they could reveal these DMs. She did censor them, right? But she didn't explicitly say these people have said I can anonymously release these DMs that I received from them. So I have to question whether permission was given to release DMs. And I also have to question whether people who were DMing Doublelift knew that their DMs were going to appear on her stream.
Seems implausible to me.
She also, even though she censored the names of certain people, showed screenshots of DMs of Reginald's. So Reginald, when he was being pathetic and begging everyone he's ever met to say nice things about him when all the truth about him came out.
So basically what you said on this show that everyone denied, they were like, no, people are coming out and saying it's exactly
I knew it happened because I knew a bunch of people who he did that to, obviously, where everybody was telling me like, oh, Reggie's like DMing me and like begging for this. So basically, Leena will censor the person's name, but Reggie can just go back and see who he sent that DM to and then know who Leena was talking to and then ostensibly take vengeance upon them, considering that one of the primary claims as to why people couldn't speak out about Reggie was he had a lot of power in the industry and then could basically block people from taking future jobs. So he can still do that, by the way. Even though he's not directly involved with the league team, he can still message all his little buddies, all his little owner buddies that spoke out positively for him. And guess what? Those owners aren't going to give a fuck about that person. They're going to say, oh, this person is leaking DMs, like private message that I, as an owner, am sending to them.
Yep.
I'm not going to hire them. So she actually probably did just fuck a bunch of people by doing this. But I watched the whole thing on my stream because my stream chat voted to watch this. And so we watched the entire thing and it is outrageous, guys. First off, because as I said on my stream, I don't even know why she feels the need to defend herself as if she did something wrong when no one is claiming
guilty conscience.
Yeah. No one is claiming that she was responsible for any of this shit that Reginald happened. Is she complicit? Absolutely. That's not even a question. It's not even a question.
I do think she is responsible in the context that when you are the president, you preside over that, and you do not even at a minimum leak the journalist. You essentially become some form of an accomplice at that point. You do have that. You are the one person with the power to do something about it.
It's even worse than that. She leaked a DM where she said in the DM, these are her words, that she would take this information to the grave. She would take it to the grave. That all of this abuse had occurred.
So now I have to actually go to hell just to find out. No, whatever. It's a joke. Great. Now I have to be damned to hell just to find out the real story.
She outed herself as being complicit by saying that she was going to cover this shit up until she died. She changed her mind, fortunately, like credit to her. But here's the thing. I think she was complicit, but I also think that she was a victim of this abuse. Almost certainly. And I think she might have been.
Everyone was seemingly, right?
Sure. She might have been the number one victim because she dated him, because she was an executive at the company, because she was there for 10 years. She might actually be the biggest victim in all of this. And I do believe her stories about that she was trying to deal with the damage behind the scenes, but her stories are like, oh, I comforted this player after they were in tears, or oh, I went to HR, which like obviously isn't going to do anything when it's the CEO of the fucking company. I didn't go to Riot. I didn't go to any kind of journalist. I didn't actually expose this with evidence. But I just don't understand what's happening in her mind where she goes on stream, shows all these DMs, which are traceable by people who are involved within the scene. And honestly, if you read the DMs, you can have some pretty good guesses about who these people are as well. Not rocket science to figure out who some of these people were. Doesn't explicitly say that she had gotten permission to leak these DMs. I suspect I do not have evidence. I suspect she did not have permission to do all of these DMs, maybe some of them, maybe none of them, but probably not all of them. Given some of the content that was released, it seems very suspicious that some people would have allowed these DMs to be made public. So why do you go on your stream and do this when no one is accused, no one credible is accusing you of being anything but a victim and somewhat an accessory to the abuse that happened?
So here's the thing. Why does someone else's DM get leaked, but then your stories go to the grave with you? Like, what the fuck is that? You know what I mean? Like, can't their stories go to the grave with you also, you fuck? That's the problem, Monty. That's why I don't buy that angle until I see some sort of evidence. But here's the problem, Monty. Yeah, you give people the benefit of the doubt. Keyword is benefit of the doubt. I don't need to have benefit. I can doubt her all day long. She's lied repeatedly for years. She's done loads of shady things herself. She's constantly breached professional ethics for her job and her position within TSM and other organizations, and even leveraged personal relationships for her own gain. So my problem is this. When I look at it, you know what I imagine as a complete outsider speculating? I imagine those two probably bloody deserved each other, Monty. They seem like the sort of arseholes who both just manipulate. The joke is this. Reggie actually, in a fucked up way, seems inverted to her. She seems like acts like the cool person to all the staff, but then does shady shit like tries to replace you, poach you, fuck with you, reveal your details, sell you for nothing, fuck you, tell you have to stay in a contract. She seems ruthless in business, but a cool person to you on a personal level. Reggie's the opposite, because here's the crazy thing. Reginald seems to only just be someone who has no impulse controls, an arsehole, but he actually in business seems to actually be fairly nice to people and let them out of the deal and sort of say, okay, you don't have to join. You know, like the joke is in some fucked up way, like, because my problem is this, Monty, again, like, this isn't someone who was trapped in a basement for 10 years. Like, they were literally being boosted and promoted through the industry. By the way, spoiler, if you've never looked up those lists, like, yeah, I'm 30 under 30. I've heard the companies just pay for that shit. Like, you just buy a spot on those things and they'll find one and they profile you. The joke is, like she couldn't have benefited more out of this relationship. So at a minimum, she's on some level, I imagine, cynical, maybe a little bit exploitative herself. And then finally, the fact that at the end, she only really threw Reggie under the bus via Doublelift. He was the fucking henchman, the lackey on that one, which is a role he's been cast to play his whole bloody life at this point in time. Remember, he can just left click. That's all in life. And then the can't set up a PC to stream, apparently. And then after all that, she at the end still wore out Reggie. It's like, you know what I mean? Here's what I think about that, Monty. You know my take on this. It's the same reason why not a single executive at Riot ever outs the others, because they all know where the bodies are buried. And if you all did the crimes together, the joke is you all just look around and go, like mafiosos, let's make sure we never speak about this. We weren't here and this never happened. That's what I get the vibe of at the end, because the problem is they told too good a story. They've set it up, Monty, as though the end of the stream would be that she reveals it all. And this is like, wow, we get the mother. No, the end of the stream is we're never going to know. And even worse, she can play back and forwards with that game. Sometimes she can be the person. I was trying to do it other times. No, nothing I could do about it. But we never have any evidence. So the problem is I can't trust that person's credibility. You know when people say, well, how can we trust you, Thorin, that you know all these things about Excel or Fnatic? Because when have I ever lied? Exactly. Never. I might have had an opinion you didn't like. I might have been wrong about a prediction or how good a player is. I've never lied though. And that is what you actually, when you're keeping secret sources, the only thing, it's why as a journalist, integrity is so important. That's the only reason your credibility is that you don't tell lies about things that you won't prove. Because remember, I will never prove to you who told me that stuff about Alfari and Jat and those people. I'll never tell you what happened with the whole holy one. I'll never tell you any of that stuff because unfortunately, that is the nature of secret sources. You can never get to know. So in her case, she doesn't get to have secret sources because she's been so full of shit for so many years. So if she comes forward with some information, I'll be the first one queuing up to go, wow, did Rachel really do all that? Maybe he is worse than we thought. But I have to say, I actually think at this point in time, Benema, we're never going to get anything else. And she participated in an investigation with Riot that has not found Reginald guilty of it. I actually personally suspect what's going to happen is she's just toying with the idea Reggie might have done even worse stuff, but won't tell us. It's like, come on, man. Like what he's done so far, just be a dickhead. And sorry, as my career has proven to the nth degree, that is not illegal. Currently.
I think what's so outrageous about Leena to me is that she's still young, and she was very young when she got into TSM. She was literally a teenager, right? And she didn't have a professional background. She didn't really go to college, as far as I'm aware. She certainly didn't finish college at that age, right? And I think it's so easy just to say the following statement. I was young. I was a victim of this abuse. This was my first professional environment. I now realize from having lived life and being exposed to other jobs that this was professionally unacceptable. And I am going to spend the rest of my life, the many decades I have working as an executive myself, to never repeat, like never having this issue repeat itself in any workplace that I'm ever in. And I'm sorry to the people that I let down by
Yeah,
being
there you go.
president of TSM
Perfect.
and didn't defend you hard enough. But
Yep.
I was also a victim in this. And you know what? If you just say that, it's the truth. It's just the truth. Like, why can't we just be honest about the person that you are and say that I'm going to change over time and that you have changed? Why do we have to go on this weird, terribly bizarre PR escapade trying to disprove haters that, as far as I can tell, don't exist, who are claiming things about you? Who is making these claims? Nobody is making the claim that you are responsible.
I've never seen that as a general
Nobody.
sentiment. It's a bit like
Nobody.
when people, you know, when they claimed that, like in the Holy War, like everyone was sending messages like, you just screwed your way to the top. Like, look, I've been back and looked at those threads. Yeah, there's tweets like that, but they're just randoms. They're not. There's no one famous saying that. Nobody in the industry ever said that publicly, nor have they ever even implied it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think it is. There's absolutely no problem in just admitting that this was a situation that you were not prepared for at this stage in your life, and now you are, and we're gonna make it as right as we can. That's just growing as a person. And obviously she has grown in the 10 years that she has been doing this job. And I don't really, blame her that much for being in this position where she was constantly under the shadow of being verbally abused herself, and literally is trying to navigate a professional position where her ex-boyfriend, who is fundamentally an asshole, is her boss. That sucks. Like, I don't agree with what she did, but I also have a degree of empathy for her. And it's sad that she can't just come out and be honest about this, and instead needs to spin it all these different ways. Like, it's depressing because there is this deep-seated desire for validation within her that, you need to be stronger than that at this point in time. Like, realize you're going to have haters and just deal with it. Just deal with it. You want to be in the public spotlight. You constantly put yourself in the public spotlight. That is her thing. So you're going to have haters. Come to terms.
If you want to know more of Monte's thoughts on other topics like this, you can watch Power Spike, which is already available on this YouTube channel, or you can go to YouTube. If you watch it on Twitch right now, watch it there. Now, speaking of things, Monte, where you have to be able to just suck it up, admit you were wrong, and that you made a mistake. I made the mistake of thinking Dplus would not only be the best Korean team, I thought they could be the best team in the world. Now, I was utterly wrong on the second regard, and quite frankly, it's looking really bad for the first one. Like, if people don't know, I know on paper we all love the story. Wow, Deft gets to go and join, like all that amazing players. Like, this is Canna's time to come out. This split has already been going so badly for this team. Like, even just eye test wise, there's so many problems in this team.
Okay, so we can talk about Dplus. I don't think it's quite as doomed as you are.
We're supposed to be the best in the world.
I don't think it's as doomed as you are making it out to be. They still played the highest level best of 3 that has been played.
Yeah, that
this
was
year
a banger.
T1.
Did lose it.
It was a really good. It was just objectively, it was the best League of Legends we've seen this year. Now after that, they have boomed somewhat in the last couple of weeks. They got completely pounded by Gen.G, and they lost to KT, but KT also had a shockingly good week. But they turned around and beat Humble Life. So is Dplus going to be the best team in the LCK at this point? I think it's difficult to make that argument.
There's no reason right now they should be better than either T1. And here's the crazy one, Gen.G. Like, Gen.G is just a way better macro team.
Yes. Yeah. I think the issue with Dplus is they still haven't solved some of their macro issues that we saw from last year. They didn't replace their support player. Deft is not filling that gap, it appears. Neither is Kana. Kana has been kind of questionable, especially in terms of his teleport usage and some of the macro plays that Dplus has been making. Showmaker has been off, weirdly.
Which is weird, right? He's normally the one thing you can rely on. He's had some games that were screamers.
Yeah, it is difficult for me to criticize Dplus that much because I think other teams have really stepped up. And I think it's unfair to pretend that the top of the LCK isn't performing really well right now. Gen.G has exceeded expectations with the new
massively.
bot lane and the loss of Ruler.
Yep.
KT's coming off a week where they beat both Dplus and Gen.G in the same week. Now, Gen.G did kind of throw. So,
Sure. And also,
you know,
KT, let's be real, does have a bunch of players that were all really good. It's just you had to hope they came back into form, and spoiler, a bunch of them have.
right.
Like, that's one of the rare times. I mean, you've talked in the past about other lineups, like the Nongshim one. There would be lineups in the past where they had a bunch of good players that just wouldn't work. Like, this one is looking really good. Like, they've reclaimed a bunch of these guys.
Yeah, I think that they probably got them on a discount too, which is pretty
Yep.
nice for KT.
Perfect. And who doesn't want to
Outside,
see the KT roster org active and like legit again? Of course we do. You want all the
yeah,
big orgs to be active. They got the money.
yeah, and KT, they if we look at the series that they played against Gen.G, the second game was really the suspect one because remember, LCK went over to 13.1B, and then Gen.G in game 2, after having a pretty resounding win in game 1, decided to pick the very nerfed Yuumi for some reason, which honestly did less badly in the early game than you might have suspected, but they also allowed BDD to have Kassadin for, as far as I can tell, no reason. So they were picking super nerf champs. They were giving over these extreme power picks that you just don't give over on to a red side team in particular, where they have the comfort of picking a Kassadin, not into a Tristana, not into a Yone, not into some of these bad matchups that we know that teams are capable of playing. So that was basically a free win for KT. And then the last game was an extremely close affair, but I think realistically, if Gen.G hadn't done weird things in the draft in game 2, that Gen.G probably wins this series. So I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna read into it too much.
Here's an angle I want to hit on though. You know how last year you can tell the fans who didn't watch the LCK because they're the ones now like this Prince guy's really got no shit. Like we all know that from last split, you idiots. So spoiler, I'll help you guys get ahead of the game now. The new one to watch, he was already good last split as well, is Aiming. This guy has always been a prospect. He's always been someone that was hyped and had the mechanics. He just also had a bit of a spicy attitude, which set him back in his career. This guy is a stud as well, mate. Like, you can see, you can absolutely put resource on this motherfucker and he will carry the whole game. He's a really good player.
He had a rough start to the split, I think, is fair to say about Aiming, but in the last couple of weeks, he's been great. It was a little bit of a
clean as fuck.
Oh yeah,
there's another Draven. No. If you want to see someone carry a Draven game, go watch him, mate.
Yeah, I think aiming has been super strong in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, KT I think overall look pretty good. Again though, I think that some of these games have been deceptive from KT. Again, the game 2 that they played against Dplus in that same week, that was the game where Deft was playing Ziggs and Kellen was on Pike and they were trying to like wave clear and roam, which was just really terrible. Like Kellen's just not that guy. Probably the wrong strat there. And especially when Deft has been your most consistent player on Dplus, putting him on wave clear Ziggs is just a strange choice. I didn't like that. And Dplus, that was an opportunity for them to potentially 2-0 KT. I think KT has been helped by teams doing weird things in game 2s against them when they've been down, and then they are able to pull off reverse sweeps as a result of the decisions that are made.
Like,
by
do you think people, because they win the first
opponents.
game, they're sort of like experimenting a bit on the second draft?
It always happens. I mean, this is like the LCK thing, right?
Sure.
I think at the very least you can't disrespect KT. KT's good enough to win and then make it a coin flip in that last game, and I just don't think you want to go there with KT. But I also think teams are doing, Gen.G, both Gen.G and Dplus this last week did very weird things in game 2 that they probably will not repeat in future series. I think people anticipated KT to be weaker than they are, especially because they've had some pretty bad results themselves recently,
mate,
like
everyone, in
losing
my
0-2
opinion,
to Guangdong Freaks.
in my opinion, if you look right now, one of the most positive things after all these years of LCKs, mate, the actual top part of the table is really legit now. This isn't like there's one or two teams, fuck everyone else. The top 5 or 6 can all mix it up, all of them.
Yeah. It's disappointing that DRX with their roster is doing so badly, and Hanwha Life has struggled, but at least Hanwha Life has been looking better. They've been looking better. Again, the T1 series, in the same way, you shouldn't read too deeply into the KT win over Gen.G. I wouldn't read too deeply into the Hanwha Life win over T1, because T1 was clearly being very experimental in that best of 3. But yeah, I think come playoffs, a lot of these teams have been ramping up. I think Dplus hopefully will be able to get their shit together, and KT and Hanwha both seem to be on the up and up. Live Sandbox, little bit suspect about that roster.
They're going to fall down. They're going to come back down.
They're going to fall.
They're going to come down. Yes,
they're going to fall down, I think, a little bit. But even Live Sandbox has had some really bright spots, especially Willer. Willer has been, I think, one of the most pleasant surprises of LCK. His jungle performance has been very, very solid. And Envy started the split very badly, but he's had some very impressive games. He is an AD carry that will flash in, so sometimes he's going to look really stupid, but he does try and make the play, which I appreciate about him. And Closer has been solid as well. I mean, this roster on paper of Live Sandbox has a lot of potential. I mean, Kyle was good last year. Closer was good. Birdall is no slouch either, and Willer and Envy, stepping up and being pleasant surprises are a good indication of this team.
I also think this is a team that shows you a quality that I think is pretty underrated, actually, in the LCK, which is, in my opinion, if you go and watch the LEC and the LCS in like Western regions, right? Usually, if people are a bust in year 1, they just are a bust. Like, they're never going to be an elite player. The LCK does have those players. A lot of the names you've just mentioned were memes a year or 2 ago. But if you give them like 2 or 3 years, because of the coaching system and the way they iterate the concepts and the way you learn to play a certain way with your coaching staff, etc., dude, people can get really good in like season 2 and season 3 of playing in LCK. Like, it's not just like you have to make it immediately. Like, some of these players, when they stick around, just become better and better players, even if once upon a time they were the rookie fucking it up for Chovy or BDD or whoever it was. Like, you give them time that you can't just look at you and go, think it's the same player from 3 years ago. Like, some of them are very, very different when they're not rookies. The team I obviously want to talk about, because I know it's your whole jam, is on paper, Gen.G was never supposed to be the best team. And right now, you should probably still say T1's the best. But like, what they've essentially done, the 2 aspects I want to get your take on is, 1, the macro angle is super interesting, because obviously if you ever like lead the fucking game in macro, you're going to be a fascinating team to watch. And then 2, the way they've done it, like the coaching staff for Gen.G is also very interesting to me, because the way they've shaped this different squad around Chovy is so different to what they were doing last year with Chovy, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I think it's that different. I think their macro style stayed pretty much the same. Like, they're plugging in Pays, and he's clearly not going to be as good as Ruler. That's not a reasonable expectation of this player at this point in time. But if you have to plug in a new player, having somebody who's fundamentally strong in lane and also good at team fighting, you can kind of just tell him where to go. And every week, Pays makes fewer mistakes. In the first couple of weeks of competition, we would have seen Pays left alone in the bot side, standing under a tier 1 turret, and dying in an obvious 3-man dive. Now he's actually falling back to tier 2. He's playing more conservatively. He does seem to be developing his map sense and his game sense in a much better way. And the fact is, Gen.G still leads the league when it comes to total jungle control. They take 56.4% as of right now of the total jungle creeps in the game, which, by the way, is 4.4% above the next team, which is T1. They lead the league in total lane minion percentage at 50.5%. They are extremely, extremely good at controlling the farm on the map. And a lot of people do not like how Gen.G plays, because they play a macro style. Here's some more stats. Vision control. They have the highest score in wards cleared per minute in the entire league. And you know how they do this? By buying the fewest control wards per minute in the league. They spend less money on control wards per minute than any other team in LCK, and they clear the most wards because they are insanely efficient at vision control, insanely efficient. This team is deeply good at maximizing the value of that piece of gold in terms of getting the vision control on the map.
Why
So
it's so
I like
wild that
watching these teams.
it's so wild that everyone was actually such a critic of them bringing in Score as the coach, though, because as far as I can tell, he's killed it. Remember, Monty, all he did at Worlds is his team lost a game 5. Like, it didn't just fundamentally fail, and this is now 2 different lineups where they've just been the best team.
Yeah, I think that the World's performance obviously was underwhelming to what we expected from them in summer, and especially players like Peanut really let us down. Chovy let us down on an individual level, and so people are going to be quick to focus on them. But they seem to have bounced back really well.
Yep.
And I don't think Peanut's like the best jungler in the world, but I think Peanut provides such crazy value in terms of shot calling. Like the stats that we're seeing in vision control, the stats that we're seeing in minion control and farm control, these are Peanut stats.
You need that player as well if you're going to have Chovy, because let's be real, that has always been the downside of Chovy. He is the guy who sits and silently farms and gets all the CS. But I've always said in League, the dream is that the guy with all the farm can also tell you what he wants you to do. So he's not going to do that. He just farms. And that's why on the bad DRX back in the day, it used to be just him in a side lane on his own. Like in this, you need Peanut because he actually sort of pilots the team to me.
Yeah, and I think Chovy has become more vocal, but yeah, I think Peanut, you're absolutely right. From what I know from talking to people who are part of Gen.G, who know the comms, like Peanut is the biggest voice on that team by a large margin. And the way that they play is so predicated on, I talk about this on my Bangers Only streams when I do their VOD review, where I try and teach people how to appreciate Gen.G, because what they're doing is not obvious. Like I brought up a moment when they were playing Breon where we see a TP from Chovy that's just, from basically tier 2 and bot lane into just past tier 1. But the reason is that he's perfectly syncing a wave on the opposite side of the map with the Fiora, and they push in both waves simultaneously 30 seconds before dragon spawns, sweep through the jungle and get dragon control. They're playing blue side, so they sweep through the blue side jungle of red side. League of Legends is confusing when you say things like that. Get the dragon control, then take it, put themselves on soul point, and don't even fight, but they use a TP in order to get themselves a crucial objective and get into the game. And people will say, oh yeah, Chovy is just good at farming in his lane, but you also, which he is, but you also have to look at how he is farming the entire map, how he is going into these side lanes, how he is creating scenarios of insane macro pressure, how he's making brilliant on the fly decision making, like we saw last week. Go watch that top 5 where he stops this TP into the top side. That level of decision making in that moment was crazy.
Yes.
And so he has actually very good macro awareness. He's not tunneled on his lane. He may be tunneled on getting incremental advantages and being huge, but the thing is that he's also really efficient with the gold that he gets. He's a crazy mechanical player. So he knows the more gold I get, the better Gen.G is going to do. And you may not like the way that Gen.G play. You may not like that they play a vision game. You may not like that they manipulate minion waves super well. You may not like that they set up minion waves to provide pressure to get free objectives, which makes them not fight maybe as much as other teams. And you may think it's boring, but they are playing an extremely high level strategic version of League of Legends. And they are the Python team that slowly crushes you out on the map. And it's not in a boring way either, where it's like, oh, we have bad mechanical players that are going to, win because they have 2,000 more gold each than you. They are going to smash you because they have Chovy and Pays, who has been insanely mechanically good. And they used to have Ruler, right? So they have the flash in them, but they will you are constantly fighting on Gen.G's playing field when you are against them. And that is hard to do. That is hard to do. They're not as fun to watch as T1 from I'm going to set up this play from a half a screen away and snipe you like we saw this last week when they were playing DRX, when they play like Nidalee, Varus, Caitlyn, and they just one-shot barrel with a chain of corruption from an entire screen away, a Nidalee spear and a Caitlyn Q. Like, that's fun to watch, But Gen.G, you should appreciate them, and they are better than you think they are because you aren't watching what they are good at.
And also, here's the thing. I always say about players like Chovy, if you try to tell me he's the absolute like God, best, perfect, yeah, then I'm going to seem like I'm just criticizing him. But if you tell me he's not good, I'm going to have to become the biggest Chovy fan of all time because miss me with that line. Because even that line, it's totally reductive, like you say. He's definitely way better than just Leena now. But even that line, like they say about Larson as well, it's like, all he does, Monty, is just go up in CS every game. Like, every single we start in the lane every single time, you know, like there's a laning phase that happens at the beginning of every game. Like if you can consistently get leads, one, you are just like one of the absolute best players in the entire world because everyone's trying to do that. And two, that is how you build the rest of the game out. Like if you're always winning in one lane, jungler now knows what to do, drafts make more sense, what you're going to do with the macro play. Mate, it sets so much of the team in place. There's no he's just winning in CS. Everyone's trying to be good at that. Every single player in the world. And then also, let's be real, when you talk about that angle, that's like saying in like MMA, like, oh, he's just really good at boxing with like an amazing jab. Like every fight starts on the feet. Boxing and jab would control a whole fight. Again, like the person doesn't even have to have all the finishes. They're going to be in winning positions over and over and over and over again. That's why the joke is this. I get that Chovy seems like a player with certain flaws that could ruin a team. But mate, he's the player where if you're a coach with ambition, this is exactly who you want to coach. Because if you work it out, you're going to look like a genius. You go to the top. Like what an amazing, if you can essentially cover up his weaknesses, then he can look like the perfect player.
I mean, and here's the crazy thing about Gen.G that'll blow some of your minds. Like, Chovy is middle of the table right now as far as mid laners go in percentage of CS taken after 15 minutes. He's right in the middle. He's sixth place in the league. He takes 25.6% of his team's farm after 15 minutes into the game. Zeka takes 30.6%, so 5 whole percent more. Right. Meanwhile, Chovy is the highest player in the entire in mid lane for earned gold per minute. So what this tells you is he's taking 5% less farm than Zeka, but Gen.G is so good at squeezing every last piece of gold out of the map that he is still number one in earned gold per minute. In an absolute stat, he is still number one. Now that tells you something about Gen.G.
Yes.
And no other team in the world does this, by the way. They are unique. Like T1 and Gen.G have very different styles, but both of them have very unique styles. And that's what makes them fun to watch. It's just to plebs, Gen.G is boring.
The problem you have is this,
educated
Monty.
League of Legends fan.
Basically, when you wrote that article at the beginning of 2013, when CJ Enters Players was #1, called The Sixth Man, about how they would set up minion waves to go in and farm them, the joke is you didn't realize fans would never be on that level. Because the problem
they would never understand like, setting up a stacked minion wave to apply pressure while you fight.
That's still what like that is what this team does, and this team does it amazingly. But the problem is it's nuanced. If you're not looking at the lanes, you don't know what. To you, it's just like I imagine that fan Monty must be the fan who just watches like in the moment. They're watching the action. So to them, they're just like, oh, what the hell? The fight didn't. He had to go and clear the top with. That was set up minutes earlier. That's not an accident. They're not just the luckiest team of all time, and there's just a big minion wave there. Like they're setting that up. Like that's what also makes this macro genius. Is like it's so hard when you're playing against it if you don't know the correct like counter move at that point. You're just getting trapped, and as you say, it's why you use like the bow constrict. You're just getting choked out gradually. You just feel like less and less air, and you can't do anything. And the more you wriggle, the more fucked you are.
Yeah, and you also just don't see it coming because Gen.G is thinking 2 minutes in advance. They probably think 30 seconds to 1 minute further in advance than most other teams.
Which is the coach's dream.
Yeah, it is, because it's that art of war shit, man. Like, don't fight the fight. You control the objective without ever having to fight them, and you win the game.
Yep.
I love that. I'm famous for loving this kind of style, right? Other people do not love it.
The one consistent is T1's just still really good. And actually, Faker generally still just having loads of good games. Like, this is a really good bounce back split for him generally.
He's extremely good right now. I mean, talking about Faker, he's having one of his best splits in the last probably 4 or 5 years.
He actually should genuinely be considered like contender for best mid laner, best player in the world. Yeah.
I mean, here's something fun for you. He's still playing that low economy style. He still takes the least amount of CS after 15 minutes of any mid laner in the entire fucking league, yet he is second in damage per minute. He is fifth in damage percentage after 15 minutes because his teammates are good and also doing a lot of damage, right? But in terms of his absolute damage, he is second behind Chovy, but he takes even fewer resources than Chovy does, even fewer resources. So he's still playing a low economy style, but he's just been super, super efficient. And he's been great. He's been great, and the team has been great. Part of that obviously is Keria and Keria's exemplary performance. Like, Keria is probably the MVP, the leading MVP candidate.
He's the king
LCK
of playing
right
those
now.
ADCs in support if people don't know. Like, again, like we were saying on the past episode with Papa Smithy about the pinks, it's like, you know, the joke is they don't know the reference, sadly, Monty. So they don't know this is exactly what happened in that Overwatch Season 1 with Jonak, where he would get pocketed, where he would get all the resources as a support, but he was so good, he was like the carry. And then the joke is all these other like supports in the league, you remember, would all be like, do that for me, pocket me. It's like, motherfucker, you ain't Jonak. Like, that's what they need to have a sit down with some of these other supports in LCK and go, listen, son, that's Keria. You aren't Keria. You can't do what Keria thinks. Like, you just stick to what I told you to do. You're playing these 4 champions, but he's playing he's different. He is built different, as they say, the kids nowadays. He's just built different, mate, and he's unbelievable, that player. Is there a meta he can't be good in? It doesn't seem like it.
He's also just breaking metas, which is very annoying because his mechanics are so good, and he just realized, I mean, the reason why we know things like Serrated Dirk, Hail of Blades, and Umbral Glaive are broken is because he figured that out, and he used them very effectively. He's led the world meta on this. He's made T1 extremely annoying to draft against, like incredibly annoying to draft against. Basically, giving T1 red side is a nightmare right now because you just never know what support's going to be picked on R5 and how he's just going to bone you at level 1. So yeah, I mean, it's a really good roster. We've discussed it before. They had built-in synergy from being one of the only they are literally the only elite team in the world that kept their entire roster together. So running it back they were always going to have some level of advantage, and they've continued to play their pick composition style, their long-range engaged style, and it's been great. It's been great. They should continue to be good. Faker's having an outstanding season.
It's what would be cool as fuck. I'll say it again because everyone keeps forgetting. I'm really good at keeping track of like plot points and connecting them. Everyone keeps forgetting MSI is 2 teams. Bro, if we send T1 and Gen.G now, it's going to be fucking sick. It's going to be so good.
I mean, there's almost no downside because either Dplus gets really good again, in which case they will be terrifying just based on the strength of the players within that roster, or we get Gen.G, right? If Hanwha comes back online, you know, or I shouldn't say comes online at any point in time, if they ramp up effectively, if KT can continue this level of success, whatever 2 teams Korea sends, they're going to be good. They're going to be very good.
Right, should we talk about LPL?
Sure.
For the first time this year, because obviously, like, especially last year, we understand there are infinite games in the LPL. So we used to leave it on the past years, just when there was an expert, we'd have them. And if you notice, it was more of an interview at that point in time. The cool thing is, like, LPL is the league where I don't even pretend I watch it all, but I watch all the really big games. So this is the one where, like, I've already said it on Twitter if people don't know. I'll put it out there. I put it out there nice and early, beginning of February. I am people know this. I'm a complete mark for Knight. Like, I am the guy who was like, he's been the best player for like 4 years now. Here's the thing. One thing I never did though, Monty, is ever go all in and say his team was great. I had him on that Aaron Rodgers shit where it's like, I'll make all the excuses for you. Your teammates, they have to get thrown under the bus. That's how I'm going to make excuses for you. Here's the thing. I think that Jingdong team, which if people don't know, he left top esports. He went over to Jingdong. And on Jingdong, look at the lineup he got, guys. So he got back 369, who used to be on top with him, but now is a way better player, as you saw at Worlds. Obviously, he got in Ruler, just a little player called fucking Ruler, one of the best players in the entire world. And by the way, one of the all-time great fucking, like, I don't need all the resources every game ADCs ever. And you're now in a triple threat team. Oh, yeah. And then who's his fucking jungler? With still the Jingdong jungler, Kanavi, who's been like an MVP previously. And then they kept missing, who was obviously like part of the bot lane before. Like, this lineup is fucking stacked. It's so stacked. And they're an LPL team. So look, they obviously have flaws, but when they hit, they fucking hit, mate. I think this team's going to win Worlds. I'm saying it now.
I think that's a pretty reasonable opinion, seeing their performances.
Whereas, I was always scared of top esports and was like, oh bloody hell, they're gonna fucking choke it. This one, I feel like they can do it.
This is the JDG roster that performed extremely well last year, except they objectively upgraded at their 2 weakest positions at mid and ADC.
Yep.
So
this is a fabulously put together roster. I think it's really well done.
Yeah, and they've also gelled really, really well, considering that Ruler doesn't speak Chinese. And Dom said that Kanavi is still translating for him in game.
Oh, shit. Okay.
At some points in time. Now, it's funny that we're talking about this the week after they lose to Weibo.
Sure. Who isn't a bad lineup either, but if people don't know, it's Shy, Zhao, Carcer, like some pretty good. By the way, this is actually also, I will say, normally I actually hate the LPL off season because it's like you just chuck all the names in a sack, you spin it around, you're like, oh, this season the best rookies playing with nobody, like, well, what? But this is like an off season where actually there's been some really good teams, mate. Like a lot of people pivoted really well, but if they lost their star, like if I get in like Zhao Hu when I've lost my star, I did a pretty good fucking job. Like there's some really good lineups in the LPL, I think.
I think, spoiler for my power rankings that are coming out, I think that if this is done a week ago, we probably see JDG as the #1 team. But after losing to Weibo, I think we have to put T1 as the #1 team right now. But the loss to Weibo had like a bunch of weird caveats to it. First off, Weibo is a very good team, #1, even though, again, of course, I haven't seen the matches yet, but they had to lose last night. I mean, their losses have been hilarious, right? Because the thing about Weibo is that they've beaten both Top and JDG, but they've also lost to Billy, and they lost last night to Thunder Talk. So, I mean, questions abound about this roster. The Shy does run it down at times.
Listen, everyone knows where the Shy is. He is like a fucking unmerciful god. He does take and he does give, but you never know which. You never know which. He is the ultimate coin flip player because the joke is, it's like the extremes of the. He's either the best or the worst player. Everyone knows that. It's the Shy.
I mean, the Shy went 0-11. He went 1-16 against JDG while beating them. That was interesting.
Like, put it this way, I'll never forget that detail because it's still one of my favorite pieces of trivia. That it was during the Worlds run that he won Worlds that he had to be benched because he refused to pick the right champion. Like that's his best tournament ever. Like even in that one, like he was a bit of a fuck up. So I told you with him, I know it's sad, but because he's so good, like I'm a mark for him as well. I get drawn into that rock and roll thing of like I just do whatever I want, baby. Like I don't give a fuck. It's also, all of it.
He's kind of turned into Neo Nogari, where he like runs it down in lane, but then it is surprisingly useful with a shitty score line in team fights. I mean,
that's true.
In the third game versus JDG, he had a very bad laning phase on Sion, but he was really, really, really good in team fights. And the fact that they picked Sion was just very.
He can do a lot of fucking damage on a tank. It's mad, isn't it? He's also mad skilled at that.
The way he would just use Sion ult, and it basically like Knight was playing a Kali in these games, and he would in both the games he played Sion, and so he would wait for a Kali to shroud in a team fight, and then he would do like a two Teemo away Sion ult and just like peel her off from her shroud, and it was just, and then use Q, and I mean, he was just really annoying.
It's just a great team fight player, isn't he?
He's just a great team fight player. So, in spite of the fact, fans will tunnel on the fact that he dies a lot in lane,
of course,
which is reasonable. But Nogari also did the same thing and draw pressure. And the thing is, Nogari was still effective in team fights while drawing a ton of jungle pressure. I haven't seen the latest series, guys, because we started at 8. I woke up and did this show, so I haven't been able to watch that series yet. But he, from the score lines I've seen, didn't look like he was doing super good. But the other thing about I will be a JDG apologist here because so many of their matches have been crazy clean, just so stupid dominant. And this was the first match that they had lost. It was. This roster just looks really, really good. And this was also the first time Ruler had a bad series. He was griefing in the last game. I don't know. He multiple times he was like wall riding a Zeri into the enemy team and then just getting immediately knocked up by Sion Q and Nami Bubble. And again, credit to Crisp and the Shy, who played brilliantly in this series. Crisp is one of the best.
He's a mega player, yeah, for sure.
He is really, really good. And I think that Weibo is very underrated. I think Light is a very underrated AD carry.
Good play, yeah.
He does his job. He's not the most interesting AD carry, but on this roster, he's great. Obviously, Xiaohu and Karsa are still great. So the level of this roster, I mean, this is going to be a very competitive team.
That's why I love the building of this roster too, mate, because think about it, right? With Xiaohu, you have a player who is also just a great clutch player, guy who runs like captaincy. Pair him with the Shy and fucking Light at the moment. You're going to get your damage. That means he doesn't even have to be like the main carry. It's not all in on fucking Xiaohu. So you just let Xiaohu be Xiaohu. And spoiler, he is one of the most perennially underrated players I've ever seen. It's because, unfortunately, his team's never won Worlds. So if you only watch Worlds, you go, is he that good? It's like if you watch the LPL and MSI, you know this guy's a motherfucker. He's really good and his consistency is incredible. Think how many years he's been at the top now.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think Weibo's ups and downs, I think, are caused by the Shy, basically. But I also believe that the Shy will show up in a playoff match. I believe the Shy will show up in a playoff match. I think this team will be really dangerous in the playoffs. And they played. It seems like they played at the level of their opponents. Like you can't beat both JDG and Top, who are probably the two best teams in the LPL, considering Weibo loses to shitters. And then, come back and take some of these L's. I think Weibo will stabilize once we hit a bracket. JDG, on the other hand, I don't read too much into this. Ruler in games 1 and 3, in the games that Weibo won, was like really quite bad. He wasn't doing much damage in the first game of the series on the Varus. Like he was playing an on-hit. He built an on-hit Varus, but was playing it like a lethality Varus, which was confusing. And then in the last game of the series, he really basically lost the game on multiple occasions. So probably we'll see a bit different style of play. I'm curious to see JDG on the new patch, considering that LPL only just moved over to 13.1b this week. Because a lot of Ruler's success has come on the Zeri Yumi combo. Not that there's a question that Ruler can't play well on a variety of different metas. We know that to be true. So JDG continues to be probably the second best team in the world in spite of this loss. This looked like just kind of a bad day.
Yes. And then, as I said, there are plenty of other interesting rosters. Like, for example, if you're a top esports fan and you're like, oh, what the hell? We don't have Knight anymore. Well, if Rookie walks through the door, that might be a player that you might think the name could replace, maybe. Now, sure, it's maybe not the best period of his career. It's been some of the other years he's been stood. But again, like the problem with that team, by the way, this is why I'm not a fan of top esports, especially not now they haven't got Knight, is because Tian still is one of the biggest teasers of all time. He's another player that can just look really good, but then he'll have that letdown game. Yeah, he'll just have that game. He'll just get in the Worlds or MSI, and he'll just have that fucking one series where he ints it. But I can see why he keeps getting in all these teams, mate. Like, he is a really good jungler, for sure.
It's also the top strength of schedule has been very.
They played a lot of the bad teams, yes.
That's
why the LPL is the one league, because remember, once he said there's so many teams, it's the one league where you can't know from the standings in the week 3 and 4 who's good or whatever. Like,
for example,
yeah, exactly.
IG is not the best team in this league. Not even close. They just happen to be. IG happens to be number 1 because here are the teams they've played. Anyone's Legend, RNG without Gala and Ming. They did beat EDG, which is kind of legit, but it's like EDG is also inflated at this point in time.
It's not the one with Scout if people don't know. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, they lost to Thunder Talk.
Which in itself is a bit ominous, as you pointed out earlier. Yeah.
Thunder Talk is probably better than you think, but they're still a mid-table team. LGD and FPX, 2 other losses. Now, IG finally is going to play both Top and JDG in this week, so we're really going to see, starting tomorrow, what they're made of, and we will be reviewing those VODs on my stream. Hilariously, EDG also plays JDG and Top this week, so these boosted teams in the standings probably are going to take a bit of a hit here. But yeah, I think Top should be able to pretty easily handle these teams. Tian in China is amazing. It's only when he's gone to international events that he's really kind of fucked up. And then I think Qingtian is an interesting player. He's
had a few good games here and there.
He's had a few good games. He's had amazing Darius play, but he also has been pretty bad in some other games. So they haven't, unfortunately, Wayward just apparently had a very short shelf life. So unless he returns to some kind of form, there are question marks at the top side. I think it's unfortunate because if
It's
you
so
look
wild
at
that the
Wayward,
LPL can do that, isn't it? Like you're one of the best rookies in the entire split. You know what? I'm not feeling him. Next, it's like one of those like fucking sushi trains that come around. You know, I'll take that instead. You know what the
fuck? Well, apparently he must be doing really badly in scrims because he wasn't good at Worlds, but he wasn't so bad. He was just kind of underwhelming compared to his LPL performance. But apparently he must have fallen off a cliff. But it means that top doesn't really have a good answer in the top lane at the current time. And I think if you're top
So
esports,
just think how fucked that is, Monty. Right, this is how the LPL works, guys, and why you can in the short term beat them, but in the long term you can never beat them. Because think about this, Monty. So what they did, remember, in top is they used to have 369, but he's a bit up and down like the meme 369, right? 369. Yeah. So then they got Zoom, who was supposed to be the best in the world. Didn't work out. Immediately caught him and brought Wayward in. Wayward is doing well, not bad. Then Wayward drops off. Right, get Wayward out, get in this other guy. And the joke is, none of these moves kill the team, by the way, or kill your chances to be good. Like the LPL is crazy, the amount of talent that they have at their fingertips. Because remember here as well, you're not even signing all these guys from like another squad. These are just players waiting in the wings. Like that is the like. I don't think anyone will. You know that famous thing? I think it might have even been like some. I think maybe it was even like Rekful who did that video everyone remembers. You know, where he shows you visually how you can conceive of $1 million, but you can't conceive of $1 billion because like the billion is like you have to like pierce that so many times that you're like, wait a minute, fuck. Whereas in your brains that you just had to choose heroes, you know that like you can't conceive it in the same way. You cannot conceive if you followed any normal region, even LCK, the sheer amount of people who play League of Legends in China and the amount of people trying to be pro. It is impossible. Like I'm saying, a team A is going 4 people deep. Yeah. This is insane. This is so insane.
Yeah, I think if you're top though, the problem with Jingtian is he's a volatile player, and you can't.
And you've got Jackulov in the bot lane, mate.
Jackulov and Tian on the team. I'm like, how much volatility? Like how explosive? This is like a badly constructed bomb, right? You're trying to plant this bomb, but there's like a 30% chance it just explodes as you're planting it, and then like a 70% chance it actually blows up what you want it to blow up. If I was top esports, I would be trying to find the most stable fucking weak side top laner in the entirety of China to replace Jingtian, because at that point in time, you may have a roster that has a high floor.
Basically, bring back like GimGoon when he won Worlds.
Yeah, the problem with top esports, GimGoon's a good shout. The problem with top esports is like the floor is so low and the ceiling is so high, and God knows where you're going to be in the middle of that. And most of the time, you have a pretty good role, but
do you remember? This wasn't even from now. This was a joke I did last year. I'm trying to think. I think it was an episode. Oh, fuck, who was the guest for this one? I can't remember. But you remember I made this joke where the joke was that I think it was some European person as the guest. The joke I made was it was about Knight and Rookie. Do you remember? And I said, because they're too good at the game, the universe, I think it was maybe Jensen we had on, the universe has to even it out by surrounding them by inters. Rookie's career is so cursed. It doesn't matter how good he is because he like in this team he has 2 players in the other lanes and it's like I could enter any time, but I'll also carry just enough to keep my job. Now you deal with that. Like Rookie for real, his whole experience in the LPL is just Sisyphus. That's it. It's the myth of Sisyphus. It's like at the end, it's like, and I must count myself lucky that I will do this all over again. Like it's too much. It's too much, mate. What a cursed career. Meanwhile, his counterpart Faker every year they're like, let's just re-up with like a really good rookie. Let's get like just one of the best players to join. Like it's ridiculous how many talents he's had around him and how many good teams have had as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, top is still one of the best teams in the world. Don't get me wrong. But I don't think that they have the same.
Deceptive. It's deceptive.
They certainly don't have the same floor that JDG. I mean, JDG's like skill floor is just so.
They're just too good. Like you say, they've gelled too well. Yeah.
Already it's pretty fun to watch. It is hard, I think, in the long term if you are going to judge by the eye test now. Your hope for JDG was that it was going to take them a while to get their shit together and perform like a team, but it just happened immediately. Now you're just going to be looking at probable growth from this point forward, and JDG, I think, should be considered the early favorite for the World Championship. It's hard to imagine this group of players not being the favorite.
Which is why it's so exciting, because actually LCK and LPL look really good both at the same time. And we're heading into this baller MSI in a few months.
Yeah, MSI should be very fun.
By the way, I sadly made the mistake there as I was like scrolling through of seeing the Twitch chat. And I saw a person go like, Faker had his share of shit. Literally no one, go look this up, in the history of League of Legends ever had more champions and talent around them ever than Faker. You're so dumb. You think he has to have that every second of every day, otherwise it's unfair. Like, you're a cretin. And are you ready for the ultimate one? This is the pill. Oh, this one, I don't like the taste of this medicine. You know what? In those Faker championships from like season 8 onwards, he was the one that was carried on those was, good night, off you go to bed. There you go, you fucking idiot, you imbecile. Meanwhile, Rookie could, no joke, be a top 5 player in the world, wouldn't even qualify for Worlds. That's how bad his teammates were, mate.
I mean, just like last year, right? He was great last year. So I think the Faker point, you really don't understand Korean League of Legends, because T1 constantly was able to get the best new talent to surround Faker with by the prestige of playing with Faker, by the prestige of T1, because T1 is the most famous organization in the entire history of esports, bar none. They have such a ludicrous like brand power in Korea, if you've been there, because they had tons of the bourgeois from the Brood War era. They were built on Boxer's reputation, just like they were built on Faker's reputation. It's unfair. It's like actually unfair to be.
They have every advantage. They have every advantage, literally.
They were owned by a multi-billion-dollar like giant corporation that could pay out the ass just for marketing for them, to provide them the best facilities, while Rock's Tigers couldn't afford air conditioning. T1's just like chilling in nice apartments. Like, I don't know, guys. Like, it's such an edge. It's such an edge to be T1. And credit to them. You should build around your star players and your brand like they have with Faker. They've done a great job of it, but Faker's had a lot of help.
There you go. And also, don't worry, it's not the fucking end of the world. I'm just like Richard Lewis. I'm just good at ranting at people who said mildly stupid things, so it's all good.
It's like pretending that the Lakers or the Yankees don't have super good advantages at drawing top tier talent and professional players, right? It's the
joke is
the cachet and the legacy.
They really do that with fucking LeBron as well, mate. They're like, look at his teammates. So like the joke is that all his peers at this point in time, you moron. What more do you want? Like, you have to just do it eventually. So, right, here's the thing. Is there another team you want to pick out? Obviously, as we say, it's still early days on the LPL. There's no like super established hierarchy. So is there someone else you're interested in?
My new guilty pleasure is LNG.
LNG, if you don't know, they're a teammate that when you watch it, they are just like one piece away from being really good. Probably like a bot lane or something. But like Tarzan and Scout are pretty legit. They're pretty legit in this team. Yeah. The team also plays to its style as well. This is another team that knows how to play the game, mate.
If you like early jungle pathing like I do, it's really fun to watch this team because Tarzan and Scout have really good synergy. They do really creative things in the early stages of the game. Tarzan is just a hilarious player to watch. I mean, Dom recommended me the OMG LNG series from this last week.
Oh, yes. Because I was watching this before Best on League Show. This was the one where Tarzan, think about this, guys, has a carry jungle Maokai. Like,
it's amazing.
What? Like, and he is just fucking bonkers. Yeah.
It was the #1 play on the top 5 plays that you guys saw at the start of this. Or if you're watching this, we have started doing those top 5 plays on the YouTube channel and our social media. So go check it out. But it is a very funny. He plays Night Harvester First Strike Maokai, and he has a team fight for right after he picks up Ocean Soul for Dragon, where he does 8,000 damage as Maokai, and he basically just leaves his AD carry to die and just continues to throw saplings and brushes while people group up in the river. It's really, really funny. But he's a very entertaining. So I don't think LNG is the best team, and I do think that they've faced a variety of weak opponents, and that they will struggle versus the better teams in the league because they're not a complete roster.
Yes,
but they do put out very entertaining games. They are a very fun team to watch, and for certain phases of the game, they are world class. Like some of their early jungling is like really, really, really good. They just fall apart later.
Oh no, I've always thought, like, here's the sad thing. Everyone gets now all the other players. You all know how amazing Chovy is and Viper and these other names. But the one who sadly will be the most misunderstood because of his career is Tarzan. Like, guys, when he first came on the scene, that Griffin team, it was like, how is a rookie like just the best jungler in the world? Like, he is a very good player, in my opinion. It's just unfortunately in China, he hasn't been on the best teams, has he? So just the nature of your career.
I do wish he would come back. If he could replace Clid on, if he could replace Clid on Hanwha, like I wish I could watch that.
Be awesome. Yeah,
I wish I could watch that.
Especially because if you're a fucking jungler as well, if you're a jungler or support, please just come back to the LCK. You're going to look twice as good, aren't you? You're going to be all Korean, speaking Korean with that same cohesive style. That's where you're going to be at your best. You're going to be at your best.
Can't make that money though. Some of these players, some of these players might eventually just come back to Korea because they have enough money and they would actually like to, I don't know, be on good rosters at some point in time, as opposed to wandering the wilderness of the LPL like this and ending up on LNG. I mean, he's lucky that Scout ended up there, I guess, but.
Oh, the joke about the LPL is a lot of the teams are like 2 or 3 good players, and you're like, wow, the other 2 are a bit shit. So what happens is it becomes like you're saying, it's like you're wandering in some sort of like fucking, we'll make it like a Weishu type, Wuxia, whatever you call it, that like the Chinese sort of medieval Wild West type scenario. Yeah,
flying around.
But what happens is it's sort of like a Zelda game. When you meet them, you're like, shit, this boss looks good. Oh, there's just that one way of beating them. If you hit from the back, you beat that one. It's like you just, the first time you fight him, whoa, shit, this might be, and then figured it out. Yeah, if you just attack that like support, he's mincing lane or whatever. Like everyone has one fucking fatal flaw, unless you're like GenG basically at the top of the league.
It's also just like flashing red to make it as obvious as
possible.
Exactly.
I know. Yeah. And also, they don't even, because this is what the LPL's like. What I love about the LPL is they are like the league equivalent of what I always said I think every solo queue jungler should do, which is called ruthless triage. Like if top lane's losing, I'm never coming top lane. It's bot lane all day long. You know, you just make the one that's ahead stronger, and you just hope the other guy is slower, and that your strength beats theirs. Like that is even how they will draft, set up the team. They don't attempt like Koreans do to be like, well, we better be well rounded and throw like a different draft at them and sort of put like, you know, let's shore up the weaknesses. They're like put more strength in. Like basically the LPL, every single solution is like an old Star Trek episode. It's like if you could reroute the dilithium crystals to the phasers to like fire. It's like they're never just using the normal shit. Everything's just overcharged in one area. Isn't it? Like, that's how they do it every time.
That's actually an extremely good analogy. It's like, oh shit, we have this crisis. And you make a simple analogy. It's like, but what if it was, what if it was like, expanding the air into a balloon with our shields instead? It's so absurd. I love Star Trek.
Supposed to just play, well-rounded, good League of Legends with solid macro. Yeah, no, exactly. Like play the normal lanes, win them out, push, take the dragon's objectives and win the game. Yeah.
What if we just did things right and didn't end up in this crisis in the first place? How about that? Oh, yes. No, we can't do that. It's always triage. never. It's always triage, never foresight.
The LPL just reminds me, Monty, of one of my favorite, so many Insight segments of all time, which was that one we first had Edward on, and I revealed to you that he didn't even time any of the flash. Like even for bot lane, he didn't time the enemy's flash. And you remember his answer? He was like, well, that's because I will just shit on them. And if he comes back and he has flash, then I will shit on him again. It's like, so, all right, well, that's certainly a game plan. It's not what I had in mind, but I know. If it works for you, God bless,
So good you never have to plan. Yeah. So yeah, I think those are pretty much the exciting LPL teams right now. LPL's pretty. I would say
we'll
LPL's
bring a guest in like a few weeks when it really gets going. We'll bring someone on who's an expert and get gold balls.
I think LPL is pretty stacked at the top right now, just because there are a bunch of what are effectively super teams within this league, and those teams are JDG, Top, and Weibo. In terms of like pound for pound talent, just being obviously really, really strong. And then we're just gonna have to see if anybody else kind of emerges from the milieu in the middle of the pack.
One thing though, I will say, this is the final thing to be said on the LPL topic, which is you're really Doinb gonna just blow 2 worlds in a row and just be like, you know what? I'm just gonna chill. It's like, what are you doing, bro? Like, anyway. Can I have a bounce back? Can you at least give me summer? Give me a fucking reach around or summer. This is ridiculous. You bombed 2 worlds in a row, you fuck. Even Tian's still playing. Because here's the thing about Doinb that's so mad. You know, he's another player that if you listen to interviews on his stream, mate, he doesn't even know who he is. Like, he talks like he's like fucking prime, like rookie or something, like as though he's just shitting on everyone. Like, because it's always that everyone else is crap and they're all messing up and they do it. And he has the weirdest takes, by the way, also on like other regions. Like, you should see before every Worlds on stream where he'll do like his thoughts on the teams. Like, mate,
I know,
they're all over the place. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Bloody hell. What a weird person. Because obviously he does have his own unique vision of the game, so I'll give him that. But fucking hell, when he turns that eye elsewhere, it becomes strange, mate.
The way Doinb operates, both in game and out of game, it's the equivalent of putting on drunk goggles. It's the Doinb goggles that you have to put on to understand how he perceives the game of League of Legends in this way, how he comes up with the things he does in game, and then also it extends to his takes on other teams, which are just I don't know where that comes from. His leaks where he doesn't.
He will reveal things that are mad, like embarrassing about him. You know what I mean? Like if you don't know, recently him and Tian were like arguing over like who essentially like bullied Nagori out of the game or something mad. Like why would he be bringing that up? Oh, he also reveals loads of drama as well. By the way, guys, fucking the stream's mad for that shit.
But the drama's so funny because I don't think he's wrong. I just think that he does the thing where he thoughtlessly spills everything that he hears, even though
it's the double lift of China. There you go.
Even though half that shit is just it is like he doesn't understand that people will lie to him or like lie in negotiations to get what they want or to strengthen their position. So he'll just repeat the lie that is clearly a lie, or this rumor that this player might go to this team, which might be like a fake, or sure, there was an opportunity for it to go to that team, but it was like a 5% chance of happening, and then he reports it like it's true.
The joke is, if you were a team at this point or an agent, you would just yourself leak it to Doinb to get it out there and push the negotiation. Exactly. Massage that negotiation with the Weibo.
I'm sure they've already figured that out in China, by the way. I feel like they figured that out years ago. Like, I'm sure the main method that agents use to negotiate is simply telling Doinb shit right now. Exactly. No, that's I mean, he's been right about stuff too, for sure. But I mean, it's just the volume of crap that comes out he's occasionally going to be right. He's occasionally going to be right. And I think people are telling him things. He is knowledgeable. It's just he spews it out before anything is close to being finalized. And with the number of different moves and sudden shifts that happen in these negotiations, it's just impossible to know.
Here's the question. Do we know yet what's going to happen? Like, is there a question segment? Do we have that coming up yet? Is that still to be announced?
We will soon. We will soon. So hopefully by later this week, we will have that all up and running. It is nearly done. We will be doing it via Discord subscriptions because the company, Last Free Nation, will get 90% of the revenue there. So it's a good way for us to do that. So we'll be opening new channels. Now is a great time to join our Discord, guys, at Last Free Nation. We'll put up those subscriptions, and then we'll add new question and answer segments on to the end of the show.
And remember, if you're watching the video, if you like it, you could literally like it on YouTube. And if you subscribe to our thoughts, you could also subscribe on YouTube. So words have multiple meanings, it turns out.
or your podcast platform of choice. We have video on Spotify. We have for a long time if you prefer to watch it there. Obviously the audio portions are there, and we're putting out a bunch of the fun clips of this show on TikTok, Instagram, other forms of social media, YouTube Shorts. So you can subscribe to all of them, find the one you like and subscribe to that. It'll be a lot of the content there. So we are really doing a lot. Credit to Andrew and Adanian, who are doing a lot of the work on that on our side. Really appreciate everything that they're doing. It's been great.
Now, tomorrow, after the LPL, Best Damn League show with me and Dom, Power Spike is already on the channel. And if you just want to say it for the moment, fuck Last Free Nation, just see Thorin only. I have just today, as the show was live, released part 1 of a K-Draw Reflections. So,
ooh, I didn't see that yet. That's very exciting. I'll be having to watch that.
The first one's about his playing career, so check it out on my channel. There we go. Peace.